Hello everyone and welcome to the Pick and Post show. The Rio Major has concluded and we are going to break it all down. Every team, almost, every champion that we've gained, and of course our pick and predictions as we take the piss out of all the silver coins that everyone has gained across the world of Counter-Strike. I'm TheEternalJay. Welcome to my channel. I've assembled the Pick and Post show panel and it's the same old crew as per usual, as per last time around. Clockwise, Retro, how you doing, man?
Amazing, mate. I am fired up and ready to talk about Counter-Strike.
Cool. Very dry and simple with that one. Sadly, there is no tragedies for you in driving tests that we can take the piss out of this week.
None today, mate.
You were saying you did not want to share your pick'ems with me because of how terrible we all did, so I'm looking forward to taking the piss out of everyone for that. But don't worry, it goes both ways. I fucked it up as well. Trav, of course, joining us, and the reason why the show was delayed by half an hour because he was late. How you doing, man?
Yeah, just flame me for it. I don't mind. Just go for it. I'm here to be flamed. We're all here to be flamed today, but you can flame me a little bit extra purely because of that. I don't mind.
Yeah.
Feel free.
Quick question, by the way, Trav, because I noticed during the major there was this ESL Black Friday Madness ad, and I wanted to.
Me.
That was you. I thought it was your voice. I was like, the fuck is this shit? Is this Trav fucking selling out for ESL?
I kept it quiet, and every single time I got a message saying, "Holy shit, Travis, is this you?" I was like, "Oh yes, I fooled another one." And it's yeah, it was pretty amusing that, but yeah, it was cool either way.
You made the major in some capacity, so I guess you're probably a little bit further on than the rest of us here in our career. BDog's also joining us once again. Thank you for coming on, mate, to replace the foregone squib. Looking good for yourself, by the way. I like that jacket.
Oh, I appreciate that, man. Thank you very much. I'm here in the varsity colours. I was literally getting ready to go on a wonderful TFT game, but then Trav actually showed up, so I'm fuming. I'm fuming.
Are you still playing it now, or?
A little bit, but like I'm excited. I'm excited to be here. You know, like it's the major breakdown. Everything's fucked. Everything's a mess, and I'm here for it.
I think that probably sums things up pretty nicely as to how Rio went down on the whole. And just to clarify, by the way, lads, because I was obviously working throughout the course of the major, I am going to be leaning heavily on your expertise for this one, because I didn't see a lot of the major. I only really saw the tail end of the Legend stage and of course the championship. So when it comes to challenges and things like that, all the intricate details, I'm going to hope that you guys have been watching. I haven't verified whether you have been watching, but I'm going to assume you have been Counter-Strike fans.
I've been living it. I've been living it. Don't worry about it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I think we all like to live Counter-Strike a little bit. So, let's start with general assessments on the major itself, because I think one of the key things is just to sort of take a stock in what we've seen over the course of Rio in the last few weeks. Obviously, ESL are billing it as the greatest major of all time, basically. Does that apply, Retro?
Do you know what? I think in some respects, yes, because I think for ESL, right, you've taken on the challenge of streaming in a country where rather than having multiple spearheads to Counter-Strike commentary, you have one individual that basically carries the Brazilian scene in terms of broadcast, right? So they had to overcome a lot of challenge in terms of getting goals set up, getting like all of the partnerships set up. They did a very good job in the challenger stage. I think the legend stage and the champion stage was also very, very well done by them. Do I think this is the greatest major ever in terms of the Counter-Strike storylines, like the storylines within the event? I think this is definitely the most unique, but I don't think I'll say this is the best major by far. I think we've had a lot better major finals. I think we've had a lot better build-up. I think back to Boston 2018, right? And I think that major grand final, I don't think will be topped for a very long time. Do I think this major was amazing? Yes. Do I think it was the best? I don't think so.
I agree. In general, it's a tough one for ESL, right? Because I bet they think, I bet they're sort of looking back at doing all the, the post major like we're doing right now, sort of the run through of how the event went. Everyone who works for ESL thinking, this shit was sick. We got so many tickets sold. We had an incredible fan fest, and unfortunately, ESL's in the end, their downfall was making the fan fest too good when it came to the champion stage, because everyone was out there with goals. Everyone was getting the signings done with Furia and Imperial and Fallen and all the the legendary players, and it meant the arena wasn't necessarily full for non-Furia matches. And don't get me wrong, that's sad. I honestly, I've seen so many tweets this week about the crowd. I'm kind of sick of talking about the crowd and how bad / good it is. Don't get me wrong, but the sort of the thing that I always come back to is Challenger stage and Legend stage. Having a crowd for that, superb, and that should be the norm for every major going forward. That crowd seemed like it was almost more of the die-hard crowd, you know, because even with the even non-Brazilian teams, they all showed up for that one. Smaller arena, I think that was a huge success. But for technical issues, which I'll get onto later, I think especially the Cloud9 Greyhound game, I think this was probably a huge success for ESL. Best major ever. Playoffs wise, matches weren't great apart from, you know, 1 or 2 maps, especially like Furia Navi, for example. But yeah, I still think it will be classed as a success to them, and unfortunately, they'll be thinking, "Why are we getting so much stick? This shit was sick." But yeah, in the end, the matches didn't live up, and the grand final especially didn't live up to what probably they were hoping to.
Yeah, I kind of want to echo some sentiments with what both Trav and Ryan have been saying, but also just kind of to kind of reiterate some of these points. I completely agree with what you're saying about the Challenger stage and the Legend stage having a crowd. I feel like that should just be commonplace going forward, and I feel like and I disagree with what you're saying. The scarcity of the tickets made the diehard fans come out for those bits, and the fact that it was so like, I think by having the success of that Challenger and Legend stage, then when you compare and contrast it so recent, because you got recency bias as well, from those playoffs to go from like the environment that we had to then the playoff environment, it was like shit, like damn,
Yeah.
this is very rough and unfortunate. But lessons to be learned here from ESL is the fact that fan fest, I was seeing on Twitter, the fan fest, the Brazilians absolutely loved it, and it was a massive party for them. And the fact that they had all of their idols in one place, they said they'd never had anything like that before in esports in general. So it's a win regardless for ESL, because the fan fest was incredible. I'm sure everyone that attended the event actually had a brilliant time, but the lesson to be learned going forward is you need to either segregate the fan fest and the arena, or just as in like have tickets for the fan fest and tickets for the arena specifically, or make the fan fest a little bit, or like make the fan fest occur not during the playoffs or something like that. Maybe like incorporate a few days, I don't know, outside of the playoff. I know it kind of takes away the hype a little bit, but then you've kind of got the best of both worlds. I don't know. I like it's not really my domain, but I really think the major was good. I actually liked the fact that it was upset. There were upsets. It kind of goes to highlight the level. I mean, we're going to talk about this.
Actually.
We're going to get into detail about how some of the teams did not show up, but this is a real testament to how 2022 has gone for Counter-Strike and the landscape of it. Anyone can beat anyone. The fact that we've got you look at matches and the crowd is so split, and everyone, the community consensus is split about who is going to win, who is going to progress further. That's incredibly good for the scene going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I can echo a lot of those sentiments myself, actually. You guys have made my job very, very easy, because I had all this, like, big show plan of things I wanted to talk about, and certainly when it comes to the whole sentiment of the FanFest being a good idea, poor execution, seems to be what I think ultimately let the major down in some capacity. A couple of things I did want to bring up is obviously, like, you know, you guys mentioned how, BDog, you mentioned how the situation was sort of wrecked in the crowd scenario, where the Challengers and Legend stage had an amazing crowd, and then during the playoffs it felt like it wasn't quite there at all. I do think that there was a certain level of pandering that probably wasn't necessarily required for the the champion stage, especially. And actually, I wanted to talk about production a little bit, because I was not a fan of how this show was produced during the Challenger stage, during the Legend stage. Champion stage, fucking hell, too many C's and L's, Jesus. Yeah, but like, you know, I hated the fact that every time we wanted to focus on the game, there was some sort of shot of the crowd, and I think that was one of the issues with ESL and their approach towards this major as a whole, is that it felt to me like a lot of the focus was taken off the Counter-Strike itself and put into other areas, which is what led to the fan fest taking more precedence from the Brazilian crowd overall for me. Is that a fair assessment, guys?
I'd say first things first. Completely agree. Like the amount of kiss cams and stupid
yeah, that
shit
got
we've had this
fucking
event,
old real quick.
Just it was embarrassing, man. I cringed. I'm not gonna lie. I'll say it straight.
Not just because you're
also,
single, Retro.
No, yeah, exactly that. Thanks. No, I think overall, right. I
was
wanted.
drinking. Why?
Yeah. I wanna say first and foremost, how they introduced the teams for me was very, very, very bad. I think you look maybe to I want to take the Blast Global Final for reference, 2021 Global Final, right? And remember when the teams came up, there was a video to each of them. The whole arena went to like the color of the team. If it was Na'Vi, it was yellow. If it was FaZe, it was red. And then they'd like come up from a platform, and then like smoke would go off. They'd walk down, and it was just silence. You just hear the crowd, right? For me personally, I think the way the hosting was done in the champion stage, I think the way the teams were introduced, the British stream or the English stream, I think we can all agree did as good as they could, considering how bad they introed the teams and how bad everyone walked out on stage. And that's no disrespect to ESL. I think again their focus is probably on the Brazilian love for Counter-Strike, right? And they probably did it in a very Brazilian way, which is welcome the teams, have a chat. For us, I think, me personally at least, I just wanted to watch the teams walk out. I wanted to hear, especially on the Furia ones, I just wanted to have the crowd at full volume in my ears, and I want to hear them scream when Furia come out. And we just didn't get that. We just didn't get that. And as you said, like the direct away from Counter-Strike, like it felt very much like, oh, look at the crowd, like a lot of people chugging their beers. And although that's cool to see a couple of times, like, come on, I don't want to see it every time there's a start of a new round, or I don't want to see it before every replay, or I don't know. I think production-wise, I do agree. However, I will give it to them this year. The content during breaks and stuff like that, probably the best I think I've ever seen in any tournament. I've got to give a shout out to Heku, by the way, because I thought when she did a bit of content where she asked teammates questions to ask the other teammates. That is genius, by the way. I'm not sure if you saw the one with Na'Vi, but that was fucking hilarious. I loved it. It was
I
really enjoyed
agree.
it.
I really do agree. The one thing, as I said, you've basically covered everything that I agree that was, wrong. I think, for example, they do it so much better in Cologne. Even production-wise, with the camera, with the, crowd cams, they show the crowd, they show someone chugging a beer. They even maybe will show a kiss cam, but it's like twice a day rather than every single time the round ends. Like they didn't take the opportunity every single time like they did for Rio, which I do think it was a bit much in the end. But yeah, you make a very good point. I mean, ESL's content filler for like the 30-minute breaks they'd have before the next game would start was the best I think I've ever seen. And as you say, you brought up the Navi one. It was the Fnatic one that sticks with me, finding out that Roy doesn't eat fruit or vegetables, and it's like absolutely hilarious. Like it's like, oh, I see a banana and I start cringing, and it's like, oh, the texture, oh, I can't go anywhere near a carrot. Like, oh my god, dude, like, yeah, unbelievable. But yeah, it was very good, and I'm quite happy that they did that, because I think that was something that's been sorely missed from ESL sort of break content. Usually it's just flyovers of the country or like surf cams or whatever like that. Sure, they played those, but yeah, they had so much of the made for madness content, which is what they build, and I think they did a very good job at that.
I mean, it's not my kind of thing personally. Like, I'm a much more like, cynical, serious kind of person. And there was a little bit of that for me. Like, I like the 10 years of Counter-Strike stuff that they were doing during the breaks. But in general, I have to concur with you guys that things were much better on the content perspective. I'm sort of semi a fan of the surf and chill stuff because I enjoy surf personally, but just like I don't want to see it during every fucking break. Exactly. I'll go and play it myself if I want to. BDog, what was your favorite piece of content from the show?
I don't know. I feel like Trav's kind of stolen mine because I really did like the Fnatic one, but I feel like that's because I'm British, right? And I'm a big Fnatic fan. I watched. I was kind of bit part watching the major. What I mean by that is I wasn't sat to my seat every single moment watching every single piece of content. I watched the majority of the games. So I've been trying to catch up, and I've been trying to actually go on they keep plugging the ESL YouTube channel, so I actually have been like checking that out to kind of catch up on the content bits that I missed, because I think content's so essential for kind of getting again like more character, and like you kind of build like your little parasocial relationship with the teams, but it kind of embeds it a little bit more, right? I feel like, just kind of touching on what you guys were saying, I wanted to add, I feel like ESL realized right before it was too late, really, about kind of incorporating the cameras in the fan fest. Like they had the hosting segment outside on the final
Yes.
day. And I feel like what would have maybe captured a lot more and really integrated it, and maybe people would have less complaints about the crowd, as if they had maybe crowd reactions from the fan fest. If they had like camera reactions from the fan fest, maybe like even if you could catch like an audio feed of them reacting to like some of the moments, some of the crowd walking out as well. And actually, that's just reminded me of something I really enjoyed, was that how quick they were turning around the team comms in some of the stages as well. Like when they were reflecting like after a map win or after like a half win, the amount of turnaround with the player cams, and then you got the gameplay and the immediate subtitles with like the comms. I really like that shit, and I'm really glad that they were able to do that in such a timely manner, to the point where we actually had a lot of them, because normally you get it like for either the big games or like once every, I don't know, couple of games. It felt like nearly for every game there was like maybe like a team com segment, and I was like, yeah, this is cool.
Yeah, I mean, knowing just from the turnaround time of what it's like to take in match stuff and then translate it into some sort of clip, it's very difficult to do that. So ESL figuring out a pipeline to do that as quickly as they did was certainly encouraging. Just in general, I think the content on the whole was a bit better from the ESL camp. I just hope that they take that and continue it on for the next event and whatever is coming up in Katowice, especially because that being a massive event of its own right, it kind of deserves that little extra touches in the same sort of way that the major does, in my personal opinion. Obviously, we're mentioning a lot about upsets over the course of this one, and as per usual, whenever the major rolls around, there's certain individuals and a lot of conversation about the formatting of the major itself, and I wanted to quickly entertain this, because I think at this point the conversation's been done to death, but I wanted to get some quick thoughts about whether or not half of the results would have even happened had the format been different here.
For me, I think there's a lot of stuff that comes down to, can you feasibly have BO3s all the time? I think it's not possible. If there was a happy medium that I wish I could have, it would be opening Swiss, so Challengers and Legends, BO1, but then we have a BO3 a round earlier. So the BO3 start at 1-0, 0-1, 1-1, rather than having BO1s at that stage, because I think it's a little bit unfair to play one day, play 2 BO1s, and be 1 BO3 away from elimination at a major. I think that's a little bit too far. But as I say, even that probably adds 3 days to a tournament length. So even one extra BO3. So it's really difficult to know how to sort of, as I say, get that happy medium. I think it's probably the best way we can have it. The open circuit gives opportunities to teams like Gamer Legion, teams like BNE, who have fought their way through. Don't get me wrong, FaZe in a million years have never lost a BNE and a proper BO3 at a major, but still, realistically, that is how they found themselves in that position, FaZe, by those 2 BO1s. So it's unfortunate, but what can really be changed in the time allocated? I'm not sure.
See, I reckon that ESL would probably be the experts in trying to sort stuff like that out, because we've seen from so many events in the past how many B and C streams that they've done across LAN events and other competitions that they run, and for my money, I feel like they have the resources and capabilities to be able to pull that kind of thing off. I reckon it probably would add some time, certainly, but I think the thing about it is that being that it's the major, one of the key arguments to make it against the format is the fact that the major has to be the most robust tournament that we have in the scene, right? And when you take a look at the results, I honestly don't think we would have had the playoff bracket that we eventually got had the system been changed, had they had more best of threes and gone with some, maybe, I don't know, GSL group stage or whatever have you, into whatever capacity you want to pitch to the idea of having a different major format. That's what I think a lot of the issues sort of stem from, and as we'll find out with our pick'ems, a lot of people got screwed over by that, in my personal opinion, especially from the team perspective. There are a lot of squads that I think should have been in that playoff that ultimately weren't.
I will say, I think the current system for the RMRs work perfectly. I love how the system is run in the RMRs. Obviously, it's the same for the challenges and whatever. It gets a bit repetitive, especially for the legend stage, right? Where it's actually like, do you know what? This is the 3rd time that I'm watching. Well, technically 4th if you want to include like RMR A and B, right? So I'm watching the same system for the 4th time in a row, and I agree. I think if there's anyone out there that would do it, it would be ESL if they did want to put up a tertiary stream. My honest opinion on it, though, I think, as Trav said, for the time that there is, for the allocation, for it all, I don't think there's any better way of doing it. And if I'm being completely honest with you, as much as we can sit here and say, oh, you know, FaZe going 0-3, would it have happened if the system was different? FaZe should be a team that capitalize on these BO1s. FaZe should be the team that are absolutely blowing other opponents out of the water.
Their own fucking fault.
It is completely, people that say, oh, FaZe should be in the top 8, it's the system. Go fuck yourself. Like, at the end of the day, like, I'm being dead serious here. Like, FaZe should be 3-0 no matter what. You give them 3 BO1s, they should win it. Look at the RMRs, right? They played 2 BO1s and a BO3. Sure, it goes overtime in 4 out of the 5 maps. But, I mean, in the game against Sprout, that was close, but they won it 2-1. You look at the game against Gamer Legion, sure, it was overtime, but they managed to win it. What's your excuse now? Well, I don't see any complaints when FaZe went to overtime in the RMRs, but I'm seeing all of these complaints now. I think you should just shut it, honestly. I think it's perfect the way it is. And I think it's actually a bit of a scapegoat at this point. People are trying to say that this system is the reason why teams are getting knocked out and this major was so boring. Well, if it was consistent teams, then that wouldn't be an issue. These teams would make it through as easy as you like.
Well, in terms of a similar, oh, sorry, go on, BDog. I know you're talking.
I'm just gonna say, like, you talk about best of ones. I wasn't gonna probably word it as harsh as Ryan did, but I feel like, look, if you want to be the best team in the world, it doesn't matter if it's a best of 1, best of 3, best of 5. You just got to win. Like, it's not. I feel like if you're coming into this tournament, you're like, yeah, we're HLTV ranked #1, we're the best team in the world. I'm scapegoating FaZe a little bit, but just as a hypothetical, it doesn't matter who you are. If you're #1 in the world, you come into the event, you're major favorites. It doesn't matter what map you get put on in a best of 1 scenario, you're expected to win that map. Go win that map.
Yeah, and also, just before I let you come in, Jay, as well, is that the thing that also is annoying is that Cloud9, for example, they wouldn't have had that ridiculously tough draw that they did have, right? Of what was it, Na'Vi and FaZe in the opening 2 BO1s, if I'm not mistaken, of the Legend stage. I can't remember exactly, but I think it was those 2. They wouldn't have had that draw if they didn't absolutely suck in the Challenger stage and only just scrape it 3-2. Like, sure, there's the things to talk about with the Greyhound match where Shiro, you know, timed out in a 3v2 at like 17-all, where they could have easily won that map and gone up, you know, an extra BO1. But still, like, it's their own fault for putting themselves in that situation. And although they did do really well in the Legend stage in the end, obviously that's what contributed to, you know, teams like Na'Vi and FaZe being in the 0-1 to kick off.
Oh, to play contrary opinion here, I take a look at that Cloud9 run that you just brought up there, Trav, and I think that in the context of, you know, maps aside and everything, in the context of best of 1s, FaZe and Na'Vi, I don't think they would have lost to Cloud9 in the best of 3 situation, and I think that's where a lot of the issues sort of stem from when it comes to how this major format has played out. Yes, I'm not debating the fact that it absolutely is their fault. FaZe did bottle it, Na'Vi did bottle it in the quarterfinals, and that wasn't, and obviously that is entirely their fault, but I reckon that had it not been as unstable as a single map to decide it all, then things probably could have been very, very different to how things played out. But as it stands, obviously, we got the results that we got, and we got the way things played out. You can't go back and change it at this stage. I just think it's interesting to discuss this because I love hearing different people's opinions as to how the major should be run, because it is always something that I think we should be looking to improve as the years go down. It's the reason why we have the Swiss system in the first place here. Obviously, go on, BDog.
What about instead of best of 1s, we have short match best of 3s?
I mean, that is a solution. I don't know if it's a good one.
That is a take I have not seen at any point, and you know what? I'm here for it.
But then the issue is the economy's so different. You know, you have to win less. Do you know what though? That's mental. Do it. Why not?
We should like have a whip round and try to see if we can get like a show match tournament of that sort of shit. You know, when everyone was talking about the charge rule set and MR12, like, why don't you sponsor all these shitty tournaments just to, like, you know, just get teams in and figure out how it works? That'd be quite fun and interesting concept. But unfortunately, I'm not that rich, so I can't fund that sort of shit. What I can fund, however, is this show to talk about the pick'ems for the major. Of course, I've assembled everyone's pick'em. Yeah, these guys are not very encouraged. And one argument to the favour of a new system is the fact that the pick'ems were completely fucked. Gentlemen, what coins did we get?
Silver. I'll say it. I am silver coiner, and I am proud. I am a proud silver coiner. And if anyone's got a gold, especially a diamond coin, if you're a diamond coin, get a job, please.
Well, I mean, it's more the fact, if you've got a diamond coin, what fucked up crystal ball were you looking at? Like, come
Yeah.
on, mate. Like, what the hell?
Fucking shrooms is what they were on, dude. If they got a
Oh,
diamond
I have a
coin,
gold
like-
coin.
You got a gold
Oh.
coin, BDog. Wow, fuck. Not half bad. All right, well, there you go. BDog's certainly the winner of the pick and post-show prediction game, and we'll get into how he did it as the tournament rolls on. I guess now's a good point now that we've talked about the major as a whole to sort of talk about the results themselves. So let me see if I can do this properly and try my best not to fuck this up like I did it last time. Of course, I've collated everyone's pick and results, and we're going to show them off so we can all be embarrassed together. In the challenger stage is where we'll kick things off. These were my pick and predictions. I had Game Legion to go 3-0 and Greyhound to go 0-3. None of those really worked out for me. As well as that, Vitality, Cloud9, Outsiders, Fnatic, Furia, and Mouse were the way I predicted to make it through to the challenger stage. I also had OG down. That didn't quite work out for me, but I was able to at least achieve my first stage as successful. Retro, you were able to get 5 points out of it, and I will also just add, yes, he has decided to put his game language in Spanish.
En español.
Which I mean, like, you can tell exactly what the fuck's going on anyway. But yeah, you got 5 points for BNE, Vitality, Mouse, Outsiders, Fnatic to go through. Game Legion OG did not. You had 3-0 for Cloud9, 0-3 for Greyhound. I think a lot of people had 0-3 for Greyhound, so that one not working out well for you. Doesn't that obviously isn't exactly like a unique thing. Trav, you got 7 right for the remaining
it all
7
started
teams.
so well.
I bet you're miffed now that you can't carry over those points from the challenges to the legend stage because Cloud9, Vitality, Furia, Big, Outsiders, Mouse, Fnatic, you got those all right. Again, 0-3 and 3-0 were a complete mess for everyone, I think, in this one. You missed out on OG and Greyhound. And then for BDog, very similar story to Retro. 5 picks right in the remaining 7 teams. Vitality, Cloud9, Outsiders, Fnatic, and Furia were right. Imperial was not. OG was not. 3-0 was EG, definitely not. And 0-3 for Greyhound. So,
I'm just saying, if EG nearly came back on that Mouse game on Mirage, they would have gone 3-0.
we can debate that, I think, as time goes on. That's probably a good point to start here in that sort of sense, right? Because we were sort of discussing over the last couple of shows, EG starting to turn a bit of a corner as of late and starting to make the right moves upwards. I did have a hard time sort of looking at EG in this context, in this major, and thinking they were going to do anything special, honestly. I had my doubts. Like, they were turning a corner. I didn't think they were turning enough of a corner yet.
No, I think you're spot on with that. I mean, the corner that they're on the chicane, to put it on a Formula One term. Like they're doing okay, but they're not ready to be at a major. I understand where BDog's coming from though, because EG had a very, very good seed, and if I'm not mistaken, BDog, I think you probably looked at the same thing as I did and saw that they had games against Greyhound and IHC. I think IHC was their first game, and they could have played Greyhound too. So yeah, I mean, it was genuinely possible, but. Yeah, I agree with you. It was one of the 3-0 picks that I was willing to take a risk on as well. I think mine was OG, wasn't it? And they actually got pretty close, but just not close enough. But yeah, I get it. Unfortunately, as we've all said, I think EG, they've got some tournaments coming up. They've got a chance in the future, but they need to put some more work in before they get any further in the major. The only way they got through to the champion stage was to get automatic on a Monster Energy advert. So unlucky.
It was the IHC. It was the IHC opener where they went down, I think, like 6-0 or 7-0. I looked at that and I was like, oh, Christ. Because it was IHC with T-side as well. And I was like, I literally, like, I closed the stream. I was like, I can't watch this.
I do feel bad for Evil Geniuses because, like, even with this sort of result, even though it was a win against IHC, having that extra context there of that T side is just like, do the nightmares ever end for these boys? Again, they're turning a corner, but they're not quite fully around the corner. So, like, yes, there's potential it could go forward in the future, but like, I'm just not sure what to think anymore with these guys because it looked okay during Pro League, and now it just doesn't look all that okay anymore. And again, you know, best of one caveat we can throw in there.
Changes.
What changes do we make though, lads? I feel like I'm asking the same question as what we did during the Road to Rio fucking show. Like, you know, is there anything that can be done?
Just get hexed out of that team. I don't know who for, but he just needs to go. It's time to go.
It's time to go.
I don't know. I will say, Jay. I know that maybe you wanted to talk about this in a different capacity, right? Speaking of roster change, I just wanted to talk about how well Fnatic did. Maybe not so much in
what we'll
the
do
challenges.
is we'll come back to Fnatic when we get to the champions, because obviously, like, it doesn't feel right to repeat points as
the
the stages go
storyline
on.
starts
So,
here.
you know,
Yeah.
it does, but we can take a look back when we get to them
All
later
right,
on. So, you know, we'll hold on to Fnatic for the time being. Another team that I did want to discuss from the challenges probably has to be the Brazilians, right? Imperial and 0-0 Nation, because despite the home crowd advantage, they didn't really do all that well in the challenger stage, did they, lads?
Nah.
Yeah.
Not
I
very
think
well.
there were so many people that thought they'd have a home crowd advantage. And don't get me wrong, I think it was plainly obvious that Furia had some of that throughout the Legends and even the champion, obviously the champions, especially in the Na'Vi game. But for me, if you look at it historically, the old LG, old SK, they never played well in front of a home crowd, and it actually has continued on Imperial. Maybe they were. We all spoke about it beforehand in our in our previous show. We probably didn't necessarily expect them to even make it through challenges anyway. But as I said, historically, they've always I mean, BDog did, but yeah, historically we always like. We see them in the LG SK era. They always they lost a final. They lost that Pro League final to Cloud9. I think they lost ESL One Belo Horizonte as well back in the day. I think that was 2018, that one. So yeah, I think they played okay, and obviously they had match points to eliminate Cloud9, if I'm not mistaken. So that was a big factor of that one. That Cloud9 came back from that off the brink of defeat to actually make champions, but. Yeah, Imperial, I don't think it was ever going to happen. 0-0 Nation, slightly more disappointed. I actually thought they looked better in the RMRs, better than Imperial in the RMRs in sort of pre-major. But yeah, I think there was a couple of performances like Demals, for example, was a little bit below par for what we expect from him.
Yeah, I think the big disappointment when it comes to 0-0 Nation was not the fact that they went out, it's the fact that they went out to IHC, and everyone was saying, oh, it's the disaster of the Pickums, because IHC was down as one of the popular ones where we'd say, yeah, they probably shouldn't be, probably should be down in the 0-3 fashion. So the fact that they lost out as badly as they did, and obviously, close scorelines and everything, but again, losing a best of 3 to IHC, that is a legit win. We can talk about formats all you want. Best of 3s are best of 3s, and at that point, you can't really debate any sort of capacity as to how the win went down. Like, it was just not great for 0-0 Nation. And you're probably right about the position that they had when it came to how this major went down. They probably were the slightly better team. I think they actually did take a map when it came to Imperial not taking anything at all throughout the course of their entire run. It was a 0-2 loss to Cloud9, if memory serves me correctly. So, like, I just don't know what to think of the Brazilian scene right now, because when you have 3 teams coming in, 2 of them go out in the first stage of the tournament in the worst scoreline possible. Like what can we pull from that on the whole?
I think if you look at the way that Furia kind of set themselves up, it's a lot more team focused. And if one player drops off, it doesn't matter, because you kind of got 4 individuals that are all kind of stepping up to the plate. You look at 0-3 Nation, and it's like Dumal didn't play well at all. And he only decided to show up in that IHC game, and it was really rough. But also at the same time, like, Taco wasn't pulling his weight for some of those games. Codzera went a little bit cold, and it's like you need all of these pieces to kind of really be stepping up. It's the major, it's the biggest occasion. You're playing in front of your fans, and it's just so rough. I mean, look at that in the red; it hurts to look at.
Because
I honestly.
You are right. You are right. Like,
look, honestly, if Dumal just stepped up a little bit more, like, honestly, these guys don't go 0-3.
Yeah, it's funny, right? Like, I was talking to, I made a tweet like a couple of months ago or something. I think it maybe was like August or September, saying how like Cesarato is the best Brazilian player for the last 3 years, and it could be for the next 3 years as well. And I had like 2 people replying to me saying, Dumal? ? And now look, like, Cesarato had a career best, arenas / legend stage performance, green in every single game, and Dumal was absolutely nowhere. So yeah, I think 0-0 Nation, unfortunately, as BDog very likely put it, 0-3 Nation, they very much deserve to go out.
I like that. 0-3 Nation. I appreciate that one. Imperial probably could repeat the same sort of like things about them, honestly. Like, again, it applies to probably even a worse situation, going 0-3 without a map win and all. I think the big major upset when it came to this this particular stage of the tournament, and the team that went out the hardest probably has to be OG, right? Because I saw a lot of us had them down as the team that should make it through. Probably not. I mean, I know that some people went to the 3-0 route, and they had that opportunity to do that. But when it came to OG, they just kind of didn't quite go as far as they wanted it to. I mean, they had a bit of a rough draw in the best of threes, obviously, with Cloud9 being their last opponent. But even then, like, a lot of people had high expectations for OG. So what went wrong?
If I'm being dead honest, if they should have gone through 3-0. If I'm being serious now. 16-5 over Greyhound in your opening game, you're always going to win that. OG then play against Fnatic, it goes 29 rounds. I'm not sure if any of you watch that. It's a lot closer than maybe you'd think. I mean, I look at that series, right, and Roy's -7, Nikodos is -1, right, and both of them are in the red on the HLTV ratings. You are missing out. I mean, maybe Fash is your other piece who actually did all right in this game, but you're missing out on your key components in this Fnatic lineup, right? And I mean, Mezzy had an all right game. Crims actually did surprisingly well. Flamesy went -5. We always talk about him. Had he have done a little bit better here? Absolutely. They go 2-0, right? And your next game, when you play Furia, it's an overtime loss. You lose 19-16. And yet again, you look at the scoreboard, Flamesy's -13. A very big piece to this OG puzzle is missing in a very crucial game. They could have gone 3-0. They could have absolutely smacked their way through this this challenger stage.
Yeah, that would have changed the draw, wouldn't it? Because they wouldn't have played Furia. They wouldn't have played Furia in the next game after that if they actually won. So yeah, that's why I picked them as well. Like, you know, decent seed, had decent matchup, especially the Greyhound opening game. It was almost a guaranteed 1-0, and then Fnatic as a possibility. That was always a 50-50 for me. And as you so rightly say, Retro, I think that was a very, very close game, and that could have easily been a 3-0. And as you say, you look at the draw, they have that game against Furia, they get to overtime. Furia made playoffs. They have that game against IHC, guaranteed win. But then their 2-2 game is against Vitality. And don't get me wrong, this Vitality is looking very rough around the edges, despite being the most recent Pro League champions. But they could have easily won that. That was, let's double check it. Vitality won the first map 19-17, then OG won the next map 16-6. So that could have been an OG win as well, and they would have qualified.
It should have been 2-0.
Yeah.
That OT on Vertigo, that was just Magisk getting 4K, 3K back to
yes.
It was unreal.
I remember watching that game with you, Brandon. I think like in the first overtime, he had like 3 multi-kills in 4 rounds, and I think he was like 12 kills in the first OT alone. He was rolling OG.
That should have been 2-0 OG. I feel like I agree with what you were saying about Flames. I mean, it just literally reflects right there on the board. But what I will say is pinch of salt with Flames is he's actually moved quite a lot of roles now since NeoFrag and Fiku have come in. Yes, they've had time. They should adjust. Flames should be performing better than he is. But that's my only kind of explanation as to why we're not really getting the same Flames as we did before this roster change, right? Because he's not really being put in these like star roles. It's more like the team environment sort of like structure. But yeah, I agree. I feel like that Fnatic game ran really close. That Vitality game should have been a 2-0 for OG. That was heartbreaking. As soon as that one goes to the final map, I'm like, oh, this is rough. Because it was that Zybu Scout round, right? That was that game, yeah. Oh my god, what a game. That's rough.
One to go back and watch then in my personal case. I mean, like, look, for OG, we always, I think, I can't remember if we always had like concerns about their stability and their consistency overall. Because again, they are stellar players, and to me, you've identified key points where they just sort of bit the bullet at certain moments, and certain players have just sort of gone missing in certain matches, which has led to them probably being a high potential but ultimately low output squad in this particular context. Like, even taking a look at the overall ratings for how the challenger stage went, like Dexter scored a 1.28 and NeoFrag's up there at 1.13. So you've got 2 like very high leaders in that sense, and then you take a look at Flames. I don't know if it's the experience thing at the major, because I don't think has he been part of the major before? I can't remember if he was part of any one prior to this point. But if it's I
think this is the OG's first player sticker major. I'm pretty sure. Their previous stickers were like RMR 2021, which were only team logo. Pretty sure.
So like, just is it a case that some of these guys are getting the nerves on the big stage?
There's got to be an element of that, right? That's going to be that's Fiku, NeoFrag, Flames' first major. You take a look at the draw. You're going up against Furia. That one, it runs really close, but but you've also got that. That's going to be the home crowd advantage, and also really good comment that someone's put in your chat, Jay. It's like, yeah, tier 1 team getting the home crowd support rather than the tier 2 ones, rather than your Imperial, rather than your 0-0 Nation. So they're going to actually thrive in that environment. Oh, it's so rough when you look at the run for OG, because you're right, it could have just been 3-0.
It could have
That's
been.
mad.
I was
It could have been.
confident when I saw the draws. I was like, okay, this is doable now. I could even get 8 out of 9, and I was looking very happy about it. Of course, it all went downhill since then, but yeah, it was a shame for them. And again, I think this stems from the fact that this major, it was a state of anyone could beat anyone. There were so many little tiny, minute details where certain teams could have won and completely changed the draw. And we'll get onto the legend stage, but also I think that that's another factor of teams having already played in the challenger stage, i.e. Cloud9. They had 5 games, what was it, 2 BO1s and 3 BO3s in the challenger stage. They'd warmed up in this particular in these particular surroundings. They'd got through that the hardest way possible, and then they go into the legend stage having played, well, apart from obviously one other team who made it through 3-2. They played the most compared to everyone else in the legend stage. So they were warm. That may be a reason why they went 3-0. And, maybe that's something to consider for future pick'ems. The teams that play a lot in the previous challenger stage are going to look good in the legend stage too, if it's in the same arena.
Well, a team that played a lot throughout the Legend stage, as well as that, obviously the unlikely squad that we saw from the Road to Rio Gamer Legion was a squad that I did want to touch on very briefly. I think that you can probably expect the fact for them not to make it through this challenger stage because it was a major underdog run. I think the fact that they had to go up to the best of 3s, however, and that went 2-0 in their opening stance is at least something to be praised for on the Gamer Legion side. They were the ultimate underdogs, but just to cap off the storyline we were following from the G2 upset and everything, like obviously just for the sake of completion, right? Like, did we expect much from Gamer Legion in this particular stage?
Yeah, I think I want to open the floor and say absolutely. They got a very rough draw in the BO3s, and you understand why they go 2-3. However, probably could have gone through. Again, like I think it's one of those teams that, especially after beating G2, you're on such a high mentally. You've knocked out one of the best teams in the world. You must be feeling amazing about yourself. A game against BNE, who, I mean, looked very good this major, may I say again, and we'll probably talk about them a little bit later. You get absolutely rocked by them. I don't think there's any way you get back into this game. Furia, I'm not sure if anyone watched that game. I think the scorelines could have been a little closer. They did a lot of trolling towards the end of maps and sort of just losing momentum as a whole. I think it's in this matchup here, if I'm not mistaken, where they actually they go on a bit of a cold streak, and you can see the scores, like the ratings here. It's just not a good game from anyone, right? No one's really putting up numbers. And then the most important one, the game against Cloud9, right at the 2-2 stage. How close are those two maps? Like, you look at that, I think it's like 16-11, 16-13, if I'm not mistaken.
16 times 2.
Oh, there you go. So even closer than what I thought. Like, how ridiculous is that? 29 rounds in 2 maps. A Mirage that you beat FaZe on, an Overpass that you looked unbelievable on to begin with as well. And if you look at this matchup here, right, at one point they were ahead. They lose 3 rounds in a row at the end of the game, despite knocking the economy completely out. They lose the game. Like, Cloud9 just put 3 rounds together in a row on the end of the T side, and that's it. Job's done. It's disappointing. Really, really disappointing.
It's rough, isn't it? Because they have wins here, vitality. They get to that 2-0 after the BO1s, and then they look, oh my god, we've got BNE. That might be the best possible draw we could possibly had in a 2-0 match. And unfortunately, BNE just completely blew them out of the water. And I feel like since then, while they were close against Fury in some scenarios, while they weren't too far away against Cloud9, those are the 2 teams that should be 100% beating them every day of the week. So yeah, just unfortunate on the timing on that one for those guys to have to play Fury and Cloud9. But that's what you have to do. So in Game Legion's case, we speak about teams that have played less opposition to make it through to the champion stage. Even these are the teams you have to beat in BO3s to prove you can make it. But they're set for the future. Well, unless they get poached, which I hope they don't. They're set to have a great end of the year and beginning of 2023, especially if they do well in the upcoming Leagues and Masters.
What I will say, just jumping in quick, is this Gamer Legion team was never built for immediate success. It was always a long-term project. Ash and Shuwei had complete control over who they wanted to pick up and bring in, and they entered the RMR before they were even announced as being Gamer Legion, right? and they wanted to just see how it goes. The fact that, yeah, they go 2-0 up in the challenger stage and they don't quite have the experience to show out, I can agree with you. And I can sit here and I can say, yeah, do you know what? In those best of threes, they should have potentially made it through. However, the fact that they have come together with less than a month, really, of practice, they've made it through the RMR from the open qualifier. You're now in the challenger stage. That's an incredible story. And also what that does is that gives so much incentive to this team that can now go on and they can build for the future. So to be honest with you, could they have made it through? Yeah. Should they have made it through? Maybe. Who knows? However, it's such a positive success story for this organization.
Yeah, I was going to come in and say I disagree with the point that it was a disappointing run for Gamer Legion, right? Just because you add all that context, having only a month, having just come in just prior to the RMRs, doing well in that, being the unpredictable squad, making it so far as to even be in promotion contention in that one. Like, in the grand scale of things, Gamer Legion have done a fantastic job. And as you mentioned, like, you know, the long-term success of this team is very apparent in my eyes, just because even in the short-term basis of what we've seen from RMR to here, like, it looks so solid in what they could do. You mentioned Elisa Masters, that's going to be an opportunity for them to prove that they can do it on the big stage, coming up later on this weekend and everything. And then there's more opportunities for Gamer Legion coming around. I think they've still got their spots in ECR. If I remember correctly, they'll probably get invites to all the Tier 2 online cups. So there's a lot of opportunities for Gamer Legion to carry this on forward. And I think it's going to be a great learning experience because I don't think any of these guys, minus A-Core, has had an opportunity to go to the to go to a major. So the fact that they've done so, with the most unlikely results, yeah, I think they can walk away with their heads held high, honestly. Like, and you talk about the idea that whether or not they get poached, I honestly don't think they will. No one had like a truly standout performance when it comes to, like, you know, a Tier 1 team hunting for a new prospective player. So for me, I look at this squad and I think they will stay together going into the new year, and I think that they have an opportunity to prove themselves right as to what they did here in Rio.
I'd just like to say one thing. When I say it's a disappointing run, I don't mean for the players. I meant as a whole, right? How close they were to being able to make the next stage, right? So that wasn't me saying, you know, I'm disappointed they didn't do better, because at the end of the day, as you said, like, given the climate that they were put in, like, they did an unbelievable job. I'm just saying, like, it's a close but no cigar kind of job where actually you were very, very close on making it to the legend stage. So that was my view on it.
It's funny because in my notes I have that exact quote put down on the show plan, close but no cigar, and Retro has not seen that. So, you know, great minds think alike right there. Anyone else we should bring up before we move on to legend stage, lads? Anyone you want to talk about?
Okay, I will say one team that I think probably should have got closer than perhaps I was expecting was 9Z to get to 2 wins out of 3. I thought with how new and young their roster was, I was surprised that they actually got 2. And I will end off the challenger stage by also saying the fact that Greyhound got 1 in the circumstances that I mentioned earlier, the Cloud9 game, Shiro, 3v2 on Elbow on Dust 2, times out, Greyhound win the round. They can't obviously replay it because damage has been taken. And then they win at 1917. That was an unbelievable situation. And that is, unfortunately, probably the worst. Thankfully, tech pauses and disconnects weren't necessarily too bad in timing-wise for the matches. That was the worst one I think we had in the whole event. And thankfully, it didn't affect Cloud9's
Outsiders Heroic will disagree with you on that one, honestly.
No, we'll get onto that. That took a long while to get going. But I'm just talking about like timing in a round and that could change the result. That was the worst one for me, and I'm glad that it happened then and didn't affect Cloud9's progression.
If we're talking about tech issues as well, just wanted to say as well, fair play to outsiders, especially in that Fnatic game on Overpass, with 3 of them DC'd on the one side.
Yes.
And they could have easier said, well, damage has been done, don't care. But no, both teams came to a sensible agreement and they reset the round. It didn't work out for Fnatic, but I just want to say fair play, because, like, they didn't have to do that at all. But the fact that they did, there's a lot of respect there.
Yeah. Cool, awesome. Well, there you go. It's a nice positive note to end off the challenger stage with. Of course, the teams that were eliminated at this stage, as we mentioned, Imperial, 00 Nation, IHC, Evil Geniuses, Greyhound, 9Z, OG, Gamer Legion, all went out. The other remaining 8 went through, and thus we move on to discuss our legend stage, gentlemen. This probably is, I think, the position where a lot of the pick'ems went off the rails for everyone. Obviously, we saw some very stellar stuff from everyone over the course of that one, even Trav getting the 7 overall teams and everything and all that shit. So just to, again, show off exactly how the pick'ems went for the legend stage, so you can see exactly how far off the rails everything went. You'll notice one very consistent element over the course of all 4 of our pick'ems, but just for my starting things, I went NIP 3-0, disappointing, 0-3 for BNE, congratulations congratulations on shutting me the fuck up. Vitality and Liquid to make it through. They didn't do so. I did, however, get correct. Na'Vi, Furia, Outsiders, Heroic. That obviously is not enough to make the diamond coin, so that didn't work out for me. Retro came up, also similar story with the 3-0 and 0-3s going awry. You had Spirit down as the 0 and 3.
Mate,
We'll get to it.
Yeah.
We'll get to it. Na'Vi, Cloud9, Heroic, and Fnatic were the successful picks in the 7. Liquid, Ents didn't quite go through, and similar story to one other team that we'll come to in a little bit of a moment's time. Trav, you went a little bit similar to what I said with BNE in the 0-3. However, you probably, I think, did the worst of all of us when it came to the Legend Stage picks. Only 3 right in Na'Vi, Mouse, Fury. You also picked Liquid, Vitality, NIP to go through. 3-0 was Heroic, 0-3 was BNE. And then BDog was able to gain 4 of his predictions overall. Again, all from the 7 teams, and Heroic, Na'Vi, Outsiders, Cloud9. You had Vitality, Liquid, and also NIP to go 3-0, Big to go 0 and 3. You may all notice that I have been remiss to mention one very particular team. It was the most consistent team across all of us here. And that, of course, was being FaZe. I think the most obvious team that we looked at to say they're going to make it through this stage. They're going to be pretty confident in doing so. They might lose a best of 1, perhaps, but ultimately this should be their major to take on the whole. However, 0-3 bottled it entirely, lads. They pulled off the G2 of the major. Fucking, what happened? What happened?
Before we get into this,
go on, BDog, go.
I had in my pick'ems until 4 hours before. I had FaZe in my 0-3 because I thought it'd be funny. Because I was supposed to go on podcasts, and I was like, oh well, if I put them in 0-3, it's a really good talking point. And I was like, nah, I can't do it. I'll be hounded forever. So I took them out, and no one's gonna believe me, but I promise you, they were in there until 4 hours before, and then I took them out. And was like, yeah, go on, I'll put them through. But if I had left it in there, I would have been amazing, but instead I'm a piece of shit. So anyway, carry on.
No. Honestly, this all stems from all my homies hate FaZe clan. I CBA because I was a minuscule little situation away from actually. I mean, don't get me wrong. I would have fucking fucked Diamond. Who cares? That was out the window with my champion stage pickings, like whatever. But guarantee you, I had Heroic 2-0. They got to 3-0. They got to 2-0. They got blown out the water by Cloud9. Fair enough. Just didn't happen. BNE 0-3 and FaZe to go through. If FaZe win, BNE go 0-3. I get my 4th pick. If FaZe qualify, I get my 5th. So I am solely blaming FaZe and myself for trusting in NIP because that was a stupid pick. But I'm still annoyed more at FaZe than anything else. I trusted in NIP because of their RMR results. I shouldn't have. Not picking Cloud9 is idiotic as fuck. Hindsight is 2020. Hindsight is whatever. Someone go next.
To share my horror story on the BNE FaZe thing, actually, because we were doing missed games during the Legend stage, and the last match that we just wrapped the grand finals, we were like, starting to pat down and everything, and then someone said, yo, FaZe and BNE are going to overtime. I was like, wait, which map? Map 3. Is like, what the fuck, really? And so we pulled it up on the big monitor to watch it, and we all just stopped what we were doing just to keep an eye on our pick'ems. I was like, if FaZe fuck this up, then suddenly I've lost 2 picks in one stone. And I'm just watching in horror, abject horror from everyone across that game. And I could not fucking believe how bad it got fucked up. Now, credit to BNE, man, because they did fantastic in that series. But FaZe, on the whole, like, they got kind of hard done by with the way that the draw worked out. And a lot of people were saying, oops, that is the wrong...
just to remind us again, that BDog guy sucks.
That was not what I intended to do.
Wait till champion stage.
Don't worry, that one's going to be very fun.
That is true.
Right, so that's what I was meant to show you there. Obviously, they got hard done by with Cloud9 and Vitality in the first couple of rounds, but I think all of us would have looked at BNE and said, FaZe have that, left, right, center, 10 out of 10, 7 days of the week. It'll be FaZe to win that series, and they just fucked it up, man. Like, that was the moment where it really, truly went off the rails for FaZe, right? Because I think we can all forgive best of 1 losses. The best of 3s, though, is where it's at, and the fact you lost against this team, like, there's no world I would say FaZe would lose to BNE anywhere.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, this I can, as you say, I can forgive the loss against Cloud9, but again, that draw with Cloud9 actually playing them in the opening round comes down to the fact that Cloud9 scraped through 3-2 in the previous stage. It wouldn't have been like that otherwise. But yeah, you can forgive them for losing that. You can even forgive the Vitality result because anyone can just turn up on Vitality in a BO1, even though Vitality looked pretty awful in general, actually, in the event. They looked very hot and cold. But BNE, don't get me wrong, love the personalities, love the team, but the fact that FaZe lose that is an absolute, it's a travesty. And I think really in this case as well, I was thinking about it with a few other friends too. Are we reaching the stage of a Carrigan era on a team
Yes.
where it starts to be iffy again? Because it's the same pattern with his previous rosters. He has success, sure, this time with FaZe. He has the best pieces he's ever had. He's won a major, but we're reaching that time limit again, the Carrigan time limit, where it starts to become worrying.
I was of a similar mindset actually, because I was thinking the exact same thing coming into today's show. I was like, this doesn't feel like this is gonna last much longer for FaZe, because you're right, Trav, it tracks with TSM, Astralis. Prior to that point, you know, they had that whole situation where Carrigan got benched because they weren't having faith in his calls. He went on to FaZe and tried to do great things on that first iteration of the roster, got good for a little bit of time, made a few roster changes to have the near FaZe era that lost out at Boston. Then the change came through Mousesports, same story again, not quite as successful because of the pieces, but then he moves back over to FaZe. They do well, they go to majors, they tip the major, and then of course this time around they're expected to do the exact same thing, and things just fall apart. Like, it is a pattern. You're right about how things have worked up in the history of Carrigan's previous sides, but I don't know why this is happening now of all times. Or is there any sort of insights that we can come to a conclusion as to why FaZe have bottled it at this event and whether or not this is the time for Carrigan to leave?
Brokey underperformed for me.
Okay. Across the whole event, or?
In general, I think he wasn't the same Brokey we saw in previous events. Brokey was having clips upon clips in previous events, and I think there was other aspects to the team that stepped up. There was a particular part on Vertigo, I think, in the BNE game. We just quickly checked that. Because I want to say the game against FaZe, while it was remarkable, it was also not one that I necessarily expected. It was the way that FaZe even won their one map, right? Like Twist had to do some ridiculous 4K, I think it was on Vertigo, to I'm pretty sure, was it Vertigo the decider again? I'm mixing up which maps were which, but
Mirage was the decider.
Mirage was the decider, yeah, that's it. So yeah, I think it was Twist on Vertigo that had to put in like some insane 4K
right.
from a 2v4 to recover it into a round winning situation. And yeah, it was things that had to go, players that had to go above and beyond in certain scenarios, which were not repeatable. And with Brokey not necessarily getting the numbers that he had in previous majors and previous events, they're okay, but they're not Brokey numbers. That did not help.
I think touching on the Brokey point just quickly, it's like I've seen so many bad takes on Twitter where it's like Brokey has had a bad event. We should kick Brokey. And it's like, shut up. Like, please, please
Don't
shut
kick him,
up.
man.
Look at this guy's event history, right? This is the one. Yeah, okay, it's the major. It's where it matters the most. He's not had the best of show-ins. But you look at this guy's event history, it's just basically all green. Like that is just it wound me up a lot. Like, look at it. Like, shut up, man. Like, it annoyed me so much. Sorry. Anyway.
Retro, have you taken BDog's place? Like, shit.
Yeah, I don't know. Enough said, mate. I think Brandon says it perfectly. I don't think Brokey is an issue to this team, but I think he was an issue in this event where he just really wasn't performing to his heights, right? And I think also, and another point I wanted to bring up, Carrigan, despite being an IGL, was a very instrumental piece, I felt, through the RMRs, where he was actually fragging out a lot. And I think actually in previous events as well, he was doing a very good job, not only in leadership, but he was also hitting heads. He was in the bottom 15 of the worst performers in this major in terms of HLTV ratings through the legend stage and champion stage. For me personally, that's not going to cut it. You know, for someone of Carrigan, who, I mean, sure, as an IGL, you're not expecting them to to frag out the most. But I mean, in comparison, maybe you want to look at a Mezzi, right, who has also taken roles where he has to frag out. How well he did this event and how well Fnatic performed. I think Karrigan's performance, although a lot of people say we should get rid of him, I don't believe so. This event, he was a massive red flag for me in this FaZe side because he just wasn't the Karrigan that I know and love. He wasn't shooting back. He wasn't dropping 21 kills. He wasn't dropping, plus 20 kills each game. He's got a really good average, but you look at his stats, and in this event, it was diabolical. He's in the red on everything apart from the top middle, right? Damage per round, I think.
He
Or
didn't
like,
even play well
Yeah.
too much.
Yeah, that's a good point.
yeah.
But honestly, you made a really good point there, Retro, about him fragging it necessarily. But I also think you have to look at it this way too. Sure, Cadian and Jame are AWP IGLs. That's a big difference to a Rifler IGL, where the Rifler IGL would usually just jump in first, etc., etc. But if we just look at it like set that aside from the fragging side of it, look at the T rounds that Cadian's Heroic and James Outsiders managed to grind out in the champion stage, in the legend stage as well. Didn't see that from Karrigan's FaZe. Where did it go? Like, that was just a complete absence of form, which is not what you'd expect at all.
Yeah, I mean, it was just such a shocker, I think, to everyone, because I think a lot of us had expectations that they would go to that level of form, that they would be able to win the major. Again, everyone was saying that they should win it. It should be a case of them versus Na'Vi or another Brazilian team, but, like, just everything kind of went wrong for them. I think Karrigan said it in the post-match interview after the BNE elimination, like, yeah, we just weren't good. They just hit their shots, and generally, actually, that kind of applies when it comes to that best of three, right? The fact that they had that Bad News Eagles side who were some players on Mirage, especially like two individuals that were dropping 30 bombs, a third man that was close towards that position, and you compare that to the other side of the board where you got Brokey, you mentioned, not really having his own level of performances, and Robson Twist not quite keeping up with Synopsy and Flatro. Like that, I think, is like the perfect example of what happened with FaZe in this one. And again, it comes back to that conversation of, are they losing faith in the project? Like, is it starting to go off the rails? Is it time now for FaZe to make moves? Do we give it a few months? Like, what happens from here on out?
How can you lose faith in a project that is one event away from a Grand Slam?
That's also true. Yeah. Okay. Respect
Good
that.
point.
It is a good point.
Yeah, 3 out of 4. 3 out of 4.
I mean,
you got 4 more events to do it, right?
Yeah,
well?
I think I think that's accurate. I have to double check that, but yeah, you are right about that, and obviously they'll have like Katowice and things like that, which they have an opportunity to make the Grand Slam happen. I guess in that sense that you'd give it a little bit more time before the project starts to make moves. But that aside, like seeing what we have right now for the FaZe side, this is a huge loss for them to take, right? So in terms of the mental game, do we think that things are going to start to get worse from here, or do we think that they can bounce back?
I think they bounce back. I just want to say first and foremost, if we look at this FaZe side, right, and if you let's play devil's advocate, and you say they need change, and who do you drop? I think everyone would point fingers at Karrigan, right? Who are you going to pick up in place of Karrigan in the first place, right? Who is going to be a man that hits his shots, that has a very composed mindset for the game, that is more than happy in this team, more than happy to play the bitch roles? I don't think you're going to find a piece quite like Karrigan to replace him in this FaZe roster. Brandon brings up a very good point. FaZe are one event away from the Grand Slam, right? Which is a massive, massive plus for them, right? If they can get it done, cool beans, life is good. I think this is the 3rd Grand Slam, right, as well. So, like, we're still... no, this is number 4. So, season 4 of the Grand Slam. We're getting there. FaZe are the only team in the world, if I'm not mistaken, to win Cologne, Katowice, and a major in a year, right?
Yes.
And so, even if you want to take the sour taste of this major, I think everyone in the FaZe headquarters, everyone in the FaZe community, they'll look at this year and go, do you know what? We were the first team to prove dominance throughout the entirety of a year, through Cologne, through Katowice, through a major. I don't think you touch this team whatsoever. I think this has been the best year for FaZe, and sure, this is going to be a shit way to end the year. As Brandon said, you still have 4 more opportunities to win the Grand Slam. You still got plenty of time to get it done. There's no need to rush in. There's no need to even think about this like negative result requiring change, because they did so well for the rest of the year. You can't let 1, 2, 3 months worth of work at the end of the year spoil the first 9 months of absolute terror that FaZe went on.
I think it's so rude to even talk about roster changes for FaZe. It's so disrespectful to what they've done throughout the entire year. Like, can we just move on? Like, I don't
I mean, if you want to move on, we can do just that. I mean, now's a good, I guess, segue to talk about Bad News Eagles in their run, since being the team that eliminated the FaZe side. Retro is pumping his fists in glory.
I love him.
They didn't quite make the champion stage, but
No.
much like how we're talking about with Gamer Legion and all the tier 2 reps from this particular stage of the tournament, like, you can't fault what Bad News Eagles have done, because outside of the last major, like, they haven't really done anything of any particular note, really. Like, they were the heroes, the people's champions of Antwerp. Now coming into this one, you know, they went to the online circuit. They didn't do all that well at all. They even actually failed to qualify for Elite, so they had to get a secondary invite after the fact, because they couldn't even make it through the Invitational. But in this major, look, man, they're a unit to be a unit to be reckoned with here on this Kosovonian side. And it's so shocking to me, the fact that we've got like such a dry region producing players that are as good as they were during the challenger stage, especially, but even during the Legends, man. Like, again, the one victory they have against FaZe is a huge victory for them overall.
I just want to say, first and foremost, as I think the most passionate BNE fan there ever is, right? You've got to think, this team started a few years ago in LAN cafes in Kosovo as friends. They were playing together. They were just having fun in Counter-Strike. They get picked up. They're playing under Blink. They make a run in ECL, right? I think they have really big issues with the organization. They kind of get split apart. This time a year ago, I'm pretty certain it was like this time a year ago-ish, they were in those roster issues with Blink, right? That organizational issue, right? And so the fact that we're talking about a team that went from that last year to back-to-back major appearances, twice in the Legends stage, they get a win over FaZe in a BO3 in this event, like, man, you talk about Gamer Legion as being a side that has already accomplished so much. I think Rigon said it perfectly in the interview on the desk. They're so thankful for the support. They do not care that they're out of the major. It's the fact that they've turned up, they've played through the RMR qualifiers, they've got here, they got to the Legend stage, they beat FaZe. Sure, they're going packing early. They don't give a shit, man. They've just pulled off probably one of the sickest, like, motivational runs for a tier 2 team I think you could ask for. Like, maybe you look at an outsiders and go, do you know what? Like, the rebuild, tier 2 pieces, whatever. Maybe we'll talk about that a little bit later on. But as a team of players that their sole goal was LAN cafes to have fun, like, man, that's unbelievable. That's a story that no other team will be able to accomplish. It's been insane from them, this event. I don't think there's anything but positives you can take away.
Yeah, I think we were all in agreement on that side of things, right? Like, no matter what BNE do in the majors, like, as long as they're getting results, as long as they're getting a decent run, then that's going to be enough. Even if they don't make it so far as to make it out of the Legend stage, like, even the Challenger stage was so unbelievably confident from them. They dominated like almost all of their map ups. The only team they had trouble with was Big, right? And that was even just like, you know, a 16-11 sort of trouble. Everything else was single digits on the way out of the situation. And to me, like, it feels like they are a very strong tier 2 LAN team. Now, obviously, that doesn't bode well when it comes to the fact that tier 2 is pretty much all online, but when we get to see them at these events, you can really rely on BNE to do some great stuff. And again, that context of what the goal is overall for this team, just to play for fun, this must be a lot of fun for them, right?
And do you know what, as well? For me personally, I will say that they're going to the Espo next week, obviously playing in the Elisa Masters now. That's going to be a real test for them, because I think that there is a lot more consistency with teams that should be ranking above them, but they're a team that's always here for an upset. I mean, sure, the results are in the red, like the numbers are in the red for this Legend stage. I don't think they'll give one. I think they played unbelievably this event.
I mean, here's the thing. You say it's in the red. Look at the teams they're fucking facing, you know?
Yeah,
like,
exactly that, man.
Yeah,
Like,
right.
that is such a rough draw in the Legend stage, and the fact that they even squeeze a win out of it, fair enough. I mean, if you want to compare it to last major, they went 0-3 and they had easier games. Like, they had a much easier run. They went 0-3. Look at this one. You're playing Spirit in a BO1, you're playing Ents in a BO1, you're playing FaZe and Na'Vi. Like, that's a deathly draw. That is a deathly draw. And the fact that you even see 4 matchups on that screen, yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know. Fair play.
Yeah,
Love them.
And they're all friends, so it's not like they're going to make a roster change or anything, thinking they can do better, right? Like, this is just the perfect team that they're going to, you know, stick together with. There's no reason to do anything with it, and just stay as a group for the future. And especially if they get an organization, I've heard whispers of, you know, certain orgs that are interested. Whether they say yes or no, obviously remains to be seen. But yeah, I don't think it's TSM, by the way. Pretty sure TSM is a no, from what I understand, because they're looking to build their own team. But yeah, it's a good situation for them to be in. If they can perform well in Espo, I think that would go to show it cements them at that level of Counter-Strike, right? Because the level of teams in Espo are the teams that they can beat, and some of them are ones they should beat often, not necessarily online, but at least in the studio, which of course is what Esper is. And yeah, I think they can certainly prove that they're a team at that level that could even win that event. So we shall see.
I really want them to go do well in Espo. I don't know if they'll win the event per se, but if they can make it to the arena, especially like that's what I think that the ultimate goal will be for Bad News Eagles at that event. But whether or not they make it is, of course, a conversation for maybe the next show. We'll discuss that a little bit later on. For now, let's move on and talk about even more squads. NIP, we had them down quite heavily as a squad that might be able to go 3-0. Obviously, when we talk about picking strategies, we always think about a team that might not make it, but has the potential to do so if they have a good performance. This was not a good performance, gentlemen, was it?
NIP were my 3-0 as well. Like, not my 3-0 in that stage, but they were the one that I was considering. Heroic got a lot closer for me, and I'm glad I chose Heroic even though it failed. But NIP would have been the one that I would have chosen if they didn't. And for me, I got just pure baited by how clean they looked in the RMR and should not have trusted in that whatsoever, especially as they hadn't played in the Challenger stage and made it straight through to the Legends. That meant that, as I said earlier, less games played, less time to feel acclimatized in that arena. And it's why, a million times over, I should have picked Cloud9 over them. They looked very, very rough. And everything that they changed to make them look better, Resorp, Alexi IGL, it didn't seem like it was, clean whatsoever. And Hampus didn't perform that great too. So yeah, all the factors that the changes that they made that wanted to improve the team, with Hampus being let off the leash in inverted commas, and and Alexi being a completely new voice, and Rez being on the AWP apparently in the press release. Oh, Rez is as good as Zyra and Simple on this gun. I've seen him play on that level. Shut up, NIP. Grow up and do better next time. Thank you.
Yeah.
Look at the players. Can you go back to the ratings? Right, Alexi B second on the board. That should never be happening in a team with Rez, Brawl, and Etta. Like, come on, man. That's fundamentally what's wrong. Just looking at that, right?
Yeah, see, that was my whole angle with NIP, right? The fact that you could forgive them a certain amount for not going as well as they could do because they are still in the transitional stage with Alexi B only still sort of bedding into the roster to a certain extent. But in terms of the ratings, it does not feel like it was an IGL issue to me. Like, how your IGL, who's not even known to be a major fragging IGL, is second on the ball. Like, Esatag, Rez, Brolin, like, they let the squad down in my eyes. Like, that was just not a fun time at all for NIP. And then the results show, right? We're talking about best of ones and best of threes. 4 maps played, 0-1. Like, it was just a shit show. It really was. NIP were getting by on experience alone, and that's just not enough to win a major for me. And yeah, this was pretty dreadful for the Ninjas. And when we're talking about a roster that obviously coming out of Pro League did so much to think, right, this event did not go well. Let's make a change immediately after they get out of the group. Right, now let's focus up. Retr00 looks great, fantastic. We're on the right track. Come to the major, it all falls apart again. Like, what is this fucking team cursed now? Like, just what's going on? Like, how do we fix this?
If I'm honest, I want to give him a bit more time. Sorry, Brandon. I want to give him a bit more time because I think Alexi B. I don't know about you guys, but I don't think the calling was bad this major for them. I think the calling was not bad. I think Alexi has proven with this team that he still has the right mindset. He's still a decent IGL. He can still compete. For me, I think Brandon hit the nail on the head. Like, if Alexi B's calling is so good, but it's Esatag and Rez that are bottom of the sheets for NIP in terms of statistical firepower. Then for me, I don't think the IGL change was a bad move. I think it was a great one. And for me, I want to see this team have a natural AWPer because Rez is not an AWPer. I want to see people ripping heads off, which is exactly what Rez does on a rifle. Why on earth have we put Rez on an AWP? Why on earth have we got Esatag doing so poorly in this event? And I mean, it happens. I think we've just had the conversation with Carrigan being an IGL. It's a subpar event from him. It's a little more excusable because, of course, he is like an IGL. He's expected to frag out maybe a little less than normal riflers and whatever. This is no excuse for NIP, though, because it was such smooth sailing through the RMRs. They looked a very good team. They looked very dominant. They sucked at the major, man. They sucked. And for me, you've got to get an AWP change. I'm not saying get rid of Rez. I'm saying you've got to take him off the AWP. But then you've got to pick someone else up. Who's that call up? I don't know. It's difficult to say with this team because I think you want to give it a bit more time with Alexi B so they can kind of mold into their roles. But if this event is a showcase to come, how good they looked at the RMRs to how shit they looked in the major, I don't know. I think 100% I could see us having a talk in 6 months' time with NIP pushing out a press release saying that they've picked up an AWP and they've moved someone to the bench, in all honesty.
I think what's happened with this lineup is they've changed too many things too quickly. So you brought in Alexi B. In this transition period where you've got a new IGL and you're naturally going to change structure, keep S Tag on the AWP just for the moment because S Tag has been AWPing. He's been playing the roles quite comfortably. Hasn't
Yeah.
looked amazing. Hasn't looked like complete garbage. It's been okay. Been a run of the mill. Will sometimes hit his shots. Will sometimes towards the latter stage he was kind of missing a few sitters, but like he's not an AWPer. To be fair to him, you keep the relative structure as kind of fixed as you want, and then Alexi can slowly mold and change these different pieces over time. Rather than you bring in Alexi, you then move your AWPer, you then let Hampus have more roles, you then change Esatag's role into this, like, to be fair, Esatag is one of those players where he can just kind of flex and just kind of fill stuff. Like, he's very good at doing that. But he never really wanted to be that flex player that can do everything sort of thing. So I feel like you put him back, you keep him on the AWP, you let Rez rifle because Rez is a better rifler than he is an AWPer. That man, yeah, he can AWP quite well. He can have games that he can pop off. He's an AK specialist. He's so much better with the rifle. And I feel like NIP, they tried to rush all of this change too fast.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? Because we've said about the changes that they did make. It'd either be a hit or miss, and I think that was the way we saw it to begin with. They're taking a huge risk in making all these separate changes, as you say, and to try and do something crazy and actually make a good result. Worked in the RMR, didn't work in the major, and what I will say is that while I'll put a bit of a devil hat on for a second here and say, I think the fact they didn't play a single match in the Legend stage in front of the crowd, if I'm not mistaken, they missed out because of the scheduling. They were always on the B stream that wasn't in front of the crowd. That is a bit of karma for them, just making some dumb decisions for me. And with the fact they go 0-3, just remind me, does that mean they have to play open quals next time, or am I going crazy?
I
don't think so.
believe no, because there's a lot of EU teams that did really well. I think they have to look back at it and sort of make an assessment because only 6
It's Challenger stage that needs the open quals, maybe, rather than Legend stage 0-3 to go open quals. I can't remember.
I think it's anyone that doesn't qualify to the Legend stage has to play because, or no, it might be.
Yeah,
let me have a look. Let me have a quick
either.
look. Let me have a quick look.
No, because I think B&E hang on, fuck. We have to verify this with how the rule sets was, but I do know that like there is. I think there's a chance that probably NIP might have to go for the open qualifiers because of how bad this run is. I mean, obviously, I think it depends a lot on how well the rest of the European squads did in the major itself, and obviously a lot of them did very, very good as well. So the idea that's a thing you have to consider on the part of NIP. I mean, we'll verify it as and when it comes. But yeah, not a great day in the office for them. I do agree they probably need to give it a little bit more time and see where it goes from here. But as Retro was saying, like, I wouldn't be shocked if we saw some major announcements in 6 months from now. Yeah, it just wasn't. I mean, at this point, it might even be a good idea. We never know. But moving on from NIP, a squad that probably should have done well also in a similar sort of fashion probably has to be Vitality in my mind because they were, they finally looked like the international project was starting to come together last time we saw them through Pro League and through the RMR. Obviously, they were just doing a far better job by comparison to where the initial sort of Danish-French mix had come together. The additions came through and it felt like that it was finally coming to be something decent of their own right. But in this context, in this major, didn't make it through the Legend stage. Why?
Go on, Trav seems like he wants to say something.
No, I was actually just playing. I was playing chicken there and seeing who would jump in first. But it's a tough one. I genuinely don't have a definitive reason. Zyru doesn't necessarily hard carry as much as he used to, although he sometimes can. But I don't want to pin it all on him. I have to wonder now at this point whether the leadership of let's look at it 2 ways actually. There's the leadership of Apex, which I think is now starting to reach the end of its course. I made a cheeky tweet pre-major that Apex, if Vitality don't do well, could even look to do something for a French last dance for the Paris Major. Who knows whether that's something that he's even considering now? I doubt it, but you know, my future predictions want to see it happen, I guess you could say. I feel like he's sort of come to the end of his tether on this team, and we know Apex is very emotional, very animated on when he leads, but I feel like it was to almost a ridiculous extent on some of the rounds they were losing. It did not look great. And as for Spinks, while he is not in the start necessarily like the superstar player roles that Ents were giving him, he didn't play as well as I think a lot of people were expecting. So you have to look at Spinks underperforming slightly, Apex's leadership perhaps coming to an end, and Zyru hard carrying not as much as he used to. And I think that in the end, that combination of those three things led to Vitality's demise, and of course Zyru as well. Again, not making it through to, only had one chance at major playoffs in his career so far. He's not delivered necessarily at majors.
I think you got to look at to touch on what you said. I agree. I think some of the calls and some of the rounds that Vitality were running were like really fundamentally poor. There was a lot of game plan stuff that you kind of looked at, and I was like, why are you doing this? Or like even some of like the map vetoes heading in. Like I didn't agree with some of the picks they were doing as well. There was even a shoulder content piece about being Zen with Freya, Apex, Dupree.
I saw
And
that. Yeah,
it was a
Apex
funny
is the least Zen person of all time.
it was a funny meme because it was like, haha, these guys get tilted every single time you watch Vitality go down in this event in particular. They go to the player cams. Dupree, Apex, Magisk are all molding all the time. That environment sucks, man. That has to suck. Like, they need to do something about that, whether they get a psychologist in or something like that. Because, yeah, they're expected to perform a lot better, and they're putting very harsh expectations on themselves. And, yeah, we agree that this is a European super team project. They should be performing a lot better. But if you go down a couple of rounds here or there, even if it's a tilt round, you need to just get yourself back in that moment. And it's easier me sitting on the outside, having not played at this level, have it being like, oh, just get back in the game. It's fine. But, like, when you got 3 players consistently molded on the team, that's going to have a very negative impact on your environment. And also, to highlight and touch on the point with Spinks as well, what I thought was interesting is Spinks was it felt like Spinks was overcompensating a lot, and it felt like he was making a lot of individual plays to kind of try and bring Vitality back into a round. And he did that a lot in his tenure in Ents, but he also did that right at the start of Vitality when they did well in Pro League. And I noticed a lot of teams were just kind of holding just that little bit extra seconds to see if Spinks would push. A lot of times Spinks got punished. So I feel like a little bit more restraint is needed from him there in those moments. They'll go back and they'll watch the demos. I feel like that will be a key issue that was consistent across both stages as well.
I want to play a bit of devil's advocate real quick on this Vitality side. And I want to kind of like take the scope just off this Rio Major into the performance of Vitality in the past 6 months, right? They go 7th, 8th in Dallas, right? So top 8 at Dallas. They go 2nd at the Blast Spring Finals, right? They go 1st in Pro League, and they go 3rd, 4th in the Fall Showdown, which is a bit bad, right? But then you want to look at the other end of the stick, right? Where the results are massively in the red, right? And you want to talk about a 9th, 12th finish in Cologne, losing to Mouse. You want to talk about a 7th, 9th finish in the 4 groups, losing to G2, 2-1. You want to talk about the fact that you go 1-2 against Astralis in the Blast Fall Showdown. Not even the main event, the Showdown, right?
Yeah.
Like, when the highs are there, they've been phenomenal for Vitality.
That was an awful loss.
Winning Pro League is, fair play. Ridiculous amount of props to them. You win 200 grand. That's no chunk of change. That is a ridiculous win for them, right? One of the biggest events of the year, and they secure it under their belt. But then you want to look at the same time, right? You go 9th, 12th in Cologne. You want to talk about maybe the fact that had you have lost an extra game, Vitality would have been out in the RMRs. Like, this side have looked very, very ropey. And I agree with Brandon. For me personally, I think we've all seen environments where if players start tilting, things get bad. I want to look back to specifically the B&E NIP game in the Blast event, right? And remember, Rigon was getting so angry, Synopsy starting to feel fueled up, and they just lost composure, and they threw like a 15-5 lead and they lost, or like a 14-5 lead and they lost, right? We know these players are very emotionally invested. That's not the environment that they need. They need cool heads. They need clinics. Because look at Pro League, man. I feel like that was an event where they were very composed. They were the underdogs. They had no pressure on their shoulders, and they wrecked some news on the server. This event, they suck, man. They suck. They hooned.
Apex needs to take I mean, obviously, you can't just switch your personality just like that. That's not how it works. But he still needs to take a card out of James' book and look how calm he is 100% of the time in the server. And you look where that's taken him. There you go.
I mean, wasn't Apex the guy that did that whole fucking during the last year's full finals, right? When the crowd were being dickheads to Vitality on the Astralis game, wasn't it Apex the guy that was doing all the fucking taunting towards them? Like, it feels to me that his animation certainly is there. I don't think anybody else is really quite as enthusiastic as he is, and certainly when it comes to tilt factor, like obviously I think that's a part of the game, and it makes a great team a great squad. Like, you think about what Heroic were able to do in the playoffs, right? And their whole pressure with the crowd against them, the back foot that they were on, the 16-6 loss that they took early on to bounce back and do that in a similar fashion on map 3, return fire on a best of 3 series like that. That is an element of the game you have to focus on. So yeah, you're right about all that situation with the whole with the personality. It's not that easy to change it, but that is something that Vitality probably going to have to do in that sort of sense. To chase up the Spinks thing real quick, I heard somewhere, I can't remember where it was, that apparently the Vitality players took pay cuts to get him into the roster. So the fact that he's like 4th highest of the squad, the 4th player on the board when it comes to this squad, is that like concerning, the fact that they've made all these sacrifices to get him in and the major is where he bottles it the most?
I don't know. I still think there's much issue there. I think Spinks is a player that, I've spoken to a number of other fellow members of Talent who have said, Spinks a little bit of a fraud on Vitality. Like, where's the Ents form? Like, there's you. Yeah, it's you, me. Yeah, you've took the words out of my mouth. But Spinks is a little bit. It's not as good. Like, it's obvious. We don't have hatred for him. It's just that it's not what we saw and we love from Ents, and that's not something that necessarily can be replicated on a new team. It's a whole different, surroundings, different roles, different, specific ways in the team that you play alongside legends like Dupree and Magisk and Zyber, for example. But yeah, I think in terms of Spinks in general, I don't think you can be. His playstyle as a whole is one that blows hot and cold anyway. So I think he's, he can be allowed to have a cold event, and because he had his hot event, that was Pro League. It wasn't maybe as hot as Ency is, but it was still hot enough to get them a brilliant victory. So yeah, I don't think you can really say much about that for now. But if it continues, this pattern continues, then you have to look at it and be maybe slightly concerned.
Okay, I'm with you there. I'm happy to wrap up the Vitality talk then. We are a little bit pressed for time, gents, so I do want to move on to Liquid. These guys were the NA representatives, the team that should have done well to prove that NA are still there. In the end, however, they kind of proved that NA still aren't shit. To be fair, they did go 3-2, so they had that, and they drew against Heroic and Spirit in the last couple of rounds, so those were some tough draws. But again, for Liquid, like, it's just another setback for the North American region, because once again they don't have any teams in the playoffs here. Was this a fair situation for them to be at? Is this at least a respectable result for Liquid, or were we hoping for more?
I think
they were a playoff team. They should have been a quarterfinal team for me.
I think how close they got as well. They did very well against Heroic. They beat Na'Vi in a BO1. They smashed Sprout out of the park. They lose 16-2 to Mouse in their opening game. I want to touch on Liquid a little bit as a team. I know we're a little bit pressed for time, so I'll just say right off the bat, this Liquid side, if you want to look at the stats that they have within this event, it's been a bit poor from one individual that I think everyone here in common will share, right? You look at this, the player stats, and your Kindar's on a 1.0. Sure, I can't expect for him to have an amazing event every event, because that is super unfair and irrational for me to say, I want your Kindar top of the sheets. However, I expect a little bit better from your Kindar, and Nitro seems a very weak link in this event. A 0.97 over the 9 maps played, a -54 in this event as a whole. That's a stat line that I think I need to delve into a little bit more, because you look at the rest of his team, Naf and OC, really good events. Your Kindar, I mean, maybe a little disappointing for the star firepower that we saw when he was standing in, right, for Liquid in kind of like those quotation marks. This event, he had a subpar event for his standard, but it was an okay result. Nitro so deeply in the red, though. I feel like a different day, Nitro does a little bit better in this event. This team, 100%, as Trav says, is a quarterfinal team through and through.
Yeah, I mean,
controversial.
All right.
BDog.
In that spirit game, if Daps had gone in instead of Nitro as the 5th, they would have won that game. Oh
Really?
Nitro
You
was
reckon?
so bad in that spirit game. Yeah.
Yeah.
Woeful.
All right. I mean, I kind of see it because, as you said, he did stink in that particular game. Then again, though, I don't know, like
He did stink, but yeah, you're right in the sense, like, I think the Mouse game is a factor that I mentioned from before. Like, you're coming in cold from the RMR and you're getting used to the stage. I can forgive that one. The beating Navi, excellent. But then, as you say, Spirit and Heroic, and I think Spirit especially play a style that doesn't necessarily help Liquid feel good. Like, they just silence your Kindar. As we said, can't expect your Kindar to do insane things and continue to upload ridiculous plays. That's very, again, a Spinks type style that goes hot and cold. But yeah, it's been so hot recently. He was bound to cool off, and unfortunately, I think they've cooled off at the worst possible time. Spirit Heroic, as I said, 2 very close series, both 2-1. I think, as you said, Liquid were a quarterfinal team. Any further, I think, would have been a bit much. But I don't think I can look at this tournament for Liquid as a whole as a step back or a step forward.
Yeah.
For me, they've stayed exactly where they are.
Agreed. But just to highlight this point, Jay, can you go on? You got the Liquid Spirit stats there. I'm sorry, I just
Yeah, sorry, no, tell me what you want.
Just go back on that Liquid Spirit game. Click Vertigo and look at Nitro, and then click Mirage and look at Nitro.
Okay.
yeah.
So Nitro is here.
Yeah.
0.76, 11 kills on Vertigo, and what was it you want in Mirage as well?
Mirage.
Bottom of the board once again, 10 kills, 0.72.
They won Mirage 16-12 and he got 10 kills. Vertigo, they lost 16-10, he had 11 kills. Oh, come on, man. Come on.
Yeah. I think Brandon's right. Like, Travis has nailed it, saying like this is no step in any direction.
Yeah,
this
agreed.
is like exactly where you'd put Liquid. Like maybe you had them through to the quarterfinals. Had Nitro have done better in that game, absolutely, man. You see them through to a quarterfinal. You see them beating Spirit. You see them going through. The fact that Nitro's had a poor performance, it's been a bit of a shame, I think, for Nitro, because I think he himself will know he should have done so much better in that. So to not put the salt in the wound too much, like I think there is a very obvious reason why they didn't win that series. I think you can also make the argument had everyone else pulled their weight a little bit more, which of course is unfair, but in these situations you need players to make up for the player that does so poorly, right? And so for me, maybe you turn to your Kindar, your star man and the star moment. He had an average event, right? And as much as it sounds like I'm shitting on him because he's so much better than I am, and like honestly, I think he's in the runnings to be a top 20 player this year. I think that is my out there say right now. I think he's up there in the top 20 this year. Had he have done slightly better in this event, I think Liquid are 100% a quarterfinal team. He did very well, but in that game where Nitro's missing, had he have done the Yakindar shenanigans that we know and love, they 100% make top 8. And it's a shame. It is a shame.
I feel like we're being a little bit critical of Nitro, but at the same time, you think of all the experience this guy has. You think about how many majors he has attended, like, and then you could compare and contrast that. Same can be said with Chopper. He had a woeful Mirage. Chopper had 9 kills on Mirage. You go onto that decider game on Ancient, he fucking steps up. He gets 21 kills, has an incredible game, and it's like, oh, come on, man. Like, I feel like I'm being a bit critical because I expected more, and I know that Nitro expected more as well. I don't want to like take a dump on him, but
well,
like
at this stage though, this is the major. You know, you have to come up in these moments because this is the big one. This is the one that everyone gets involved to win.
And he ruined my pick'ems.
He's got enough. He's left the podcast. You have to leave the podcast a little bit, actually, gentlemen, because we are a little bit pressed for time. So let's move on from Liquid. Anyone else we want to mention in the Legend stage before we get any further and move on to Champions?
Ents was slightly disappointing. Ents was slightly disappointing, but I think, again, a 2-3 is kind of what I expected from them.
Yeah, I was in a similar boat on that one there, so I didn't want to discuss too much.
I actually thought they performed better than I was expecting. I thought they were going to go 1-3. So it looks a little bit more refined. I'm excited to see what they got in the future. There we go.
Righto then. So, Champions stage. And if you thought the Legends were bad, holy shit, guys. The pickings for this one really wasn't that fantastic. And, yeah. I definitely will speak for myself. I'll start off with myself and show you how badly I fucked this one up. I haven't had a worse playoff stage since the fucking Berlin Major. Outsiders are the only pick I got right in the quarterfinals. They beat Fnatic. Cloud9, of course, didn't go very far at all. Spirit, I messed up. The big one, however, I had Na'Vi to win the Major. And as we all know, gentlemen, that did not happen because they lost at the first hurdle. They lost out to that Furious side. Retr00 in a pretty similar boat.
I would like to say, first and foremost, at this point here, this very moment when I submitted them, I thought to myself, fuck it, I'm not going to get a diamond coin, and I think silver looks better than gold anyway. So I actually believed that Fnatic would rock up this event in the playoff stage. Obviously, I was proven very, very wrong. But I just thought I'd give it, you know, an out-of-field pick, which in some case, you know, putting Fnatic through to the semi-finals might seem stupid, but probably not the dumbest result of the entire playoff stage.
Possibly not. Trav, actually, I think had the exact same pickings as I did.
Exactly the same. Yeah.
Pretty much exactly the same, actually. Yeah, you got it down pat. So we got a very similar result. BDog actually had the best one of the lot, actually, because...
Stop looking so smug, Brandon.
I can't actually see him because I'm too busy producing the show. But yeah, he got both Outsiders and Heroic to secure the first round, and then he got Heroic after that in the grand finals to actually get the gold coin. So well done, Brandon, for doing far better than any of us here, because that was certainly
I forgot
impressive.
You could see me because I full screened the stream. I was just like, I'm loving it.
Yeah, I was a bit depressed because if I looked at it before and it's like Spirit and Heroic was my one. Like honestly, although I picked Navi to win the major, I could have easily seen Furia winning, and that's obviously how it panned out. But the biggest coin flip, obviously, we know that Mouse maybe shouldn't have beat Cloud9, just Cloud9 again bottled it at the wrong stage. But the coin flip was Heroic and Spirit, and I didn't believe in Spirit in previous majors, and Heroic historically suck in front of crowds, especially big crowds. Not necessarily as there was a big crowd for that game, KW, but yeah, like the grand final. That's the Heroic grand final performance is what I expected to see from them against Spirit for me. And yeah, if I'd have picked Heroic, or Spirit had won, obviously, then I would have got gold and not silver, which is a shame, but there we are.
Yeah, well, let's start talking about some of the teams that stayed in the quarterfinals. Cloud9, we'll start with those guys, mostly because I haven't really got much to say about them here. I think they're still having these problems with being like a true definitive LAN team, because they've always like been known as onliners since they were Gambit, but even in this particular context, like it feels like they're shedding that skin, but not fully to the point where they're restoring themselves to the level that they were at in the online era. And it's a very difficult thing to be a Cloud9 squad, right? Because they had such a great time during the pandemic and a great time during online. Everyone expected them to fulfill that coming into the LAN environment. They're still yet to truly do that in my eyes.
I don't think it's the LAN narrative. I think it's a mentality narrative. Coming into the event, there were interviews, and Hobbit said, "We don't feel like..." The thing for me that kind of really stood out was like coming into the event, Hobbit was saying like, "We're playing okay CS, but we don't know how we're gonna do. We're just gonna see how it goes," which is like, again, you come into this event at Cloud9, you're gonna be like, "Yeah, we're gonna crush it. We're gonna do really well." They make it through Legend Stage 3-0. They go in a quarterfinal against Mouse right before this game. And when I thought they might not win this, is they were doing like ESL were doing like the head-to-head interviews, like the standoffs. And Hobbit go, "We're not the favorite here." And it's like, what do you mean you're not the favorite here, bro? You're one of the favorites to win the whole fucking thing.
I don't
now.
know.
Like,
Some teams do that though.
what?
They purposely don't big themselves up to keep expectations low. It's a PR thing, I think, more than a personal belief. I don't know. Hobbit's very honest. I'll give you that.
Yeah,
But still,
I don't know. Like, it was. I looked at
Yeah.
it and I was like, no. Like, I think it's a mentality thing. I don't think. I feel like Cloud9 are really just kind of in their own heads. You've got arguably one of the best riflers in the world on your team in Axar. You've got Shiro, who was incredible this
Hero had
entire
an
event.
MVP performance of this event.
Shiro played
Yeah.
unbelievable, and then like Mal's, fair play to them because they proved me wrong every step of the way. So I'm picking once,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm so impressed with them. We can touch on Mal's in a sec, but yeah, Cloud9 for me, I think it's a mentality thing, to be honest.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm on board with that as well. I think it's a shame because I think this Cloud9 team would have honestly maybe got through to the final. Maybe would have had that dream run. Maybe Outsiders would have been tough knowing how good Outsiders have been, but Axile did not turn up in the Mouse game. Even the map they won, Inferno, Hobbit went 30-16 and Shiro went 20-10, right? So Axile was 14-18 in that series. He did not have a good series, Axile, and he's one of the integral parts of this Cloud9 team. And when Axile doesn't play well, it makes other players look worse. Do you know what I mean? Because Inters has always been, the support player, the bit part player, the one that can occasionally win a clutch. And people have been saying maybe it's time to remove Inters. The Entropic players are now going to be on the market soon. You've got players from all over CIS that will probably be thinking, oh, I could do something in Cloud9. But yeah, really, I think this series unfortunately has to fall on Axile's shoulders a little bit. As for C9 in general, it all comes down to those particular puzzle pieces fitting in place at the right time. They did it in the Legend stage. They didn't in the Champion stage, and Mouse took advantage of that, especially in the last two maps. Shiro, though, I agree. MVP performance. If either Furia or Cloud9 made it to the final, I think they would have genuinely had a Shiro or Keserato MVP fight, So, who knows?
Well, that's not the reality that we live in here of the Cloud9 side. Of course, they went out in that Mouse game. And I guess it's a good sort of transition point to start talking about Mouse here, because as you have said, mentioning their BDog, like, they were just so fucking impressive. I mean, I was in a similar boat, right? I was counting them out. I wasn't thinking that they'd do very well at all. And of course, they turned up and they did amazing things over the course of this one. I just thought the inexperience of the major would not really bode towards their favor, because they are essentially the Academy Dream Team, right? Like, Mouse are the best Academy squad, and then they turned all those players in and they upgraded them. They brought them up to promotions in their main squad. And since that point, Mavs have been, I guess, a little bit hit and miss at the start, but now they look like a cohesive, definitive unit, one that actually made it to the semi-finals. And for these guys, that's got to be just a world-class achievement, honestly.
I will start by saying the average age of this team is 22. Dexter is 28, right? So you look at this, how young this team is, right? The average age being 22 years old. This is JDC, Torzi, Zershan. Their first appearance in a major, right? Before this, they were known for being in the Mouse NXT. You call up a core of Mouse NXT players. You've got Dexter's calling. You've got Frozen, who I think will maybe have a little hone in on specifically, because as you can see, he had a really, really good event for them, right? And I'll circle back to Frozen as an individual in just a second. The Academy boys, sure, they're not having the greatest of stats, but damn, did this team look good. And I will say one thing, taking a map off of Outsiders, right? It was 16-10 on Ancient, 16-14 on Overpass in favor of Mouse, 16-7 loss on Inferno. Disappointing, but I want to talk about how heroic this run is from the boys over at Mouse. I am in awe of how well they did. And I'm in the exact same boat as I think everyone else was here. You would never have them through to this point in time, right? A team that goes 3-0 in the challenger stage to get all the way to the semi-finals and lose to the major champions. Fair play, man. Fair play. And Frozen, by the way, while I have that second and I have the floor, an unreal event from him. And I think if you beat Outsiders, Frozen has got to be up there as one of the best performers in the major, maybe even the run-ins for an MVP, because I think he had an unbelievable event. He was just disgusting. So good.
It's weird, isn't it? There's actually an argument to be made looking at pure results, how close, how they beat Cloud9, how they beat Liquid so convincingly, how they beat Vitality, how
Yeah.
close they got to beating Outsiders, and how well they played on the T side especially. There's even
They
a
could've
case
won
to
it.
be made in their top 3 in the world right now. It's unbelievable. Like, obviously you have to say, Na'Vi is still there, but Na'Vi look way more beatable than MOUZ did in the entire major. It's crazy. And as you say, with the youngsters on the team being led by Dexter, I'm incredibly impressed and only looking forward to seeing where they go from here, because I really think that they've got a lot of hope for the future. And MOUZ actually, it's hilarious in my case that I managed to get 3 picks in the Legend stage, because MOUZ, I believed in them, and I don't think neither of you guys did. So I got worse picks than you, despite believing in MOUZ. So yeah, it's crazy. I love all these players on this team. I think they've got a great future.
Yeah,
I think what's great.
go on.
Sorry, I
Go
think what's great with MOUZ is firstly they're playing without fear. They're just saying, let's just see what damage we can do. The amount of freedom and nature that they get because of Dexter's calling is really ingenious. Also, their T sides look really solid, and where we're in this massive fucking CT meta at the moment, that's what separates them at the moment from these teams, because their T sides actually sometimes look better than their defense.
Yeah.
Like, it is crazy. You look at Mirage, you look at the clear game plan, it's get Exertion in connector and just let them fucking kill everyone, right? That is incredible. And yeah, their T sides look fundamentally solid. I was so impressed. One thing I will say, and I don't think it mattered at all, but if I'm right, I need to stat check this. But I think MOUZ played maybe like the lowest amount of games in front of the crowd before the playoffs. So the fact that they didn't really have that experience of playing in front of the Brazilian crowd, and then yeah, you go into the arena, the turnout's not as big as you expect, but there's still people in the arena. You still got the atmosphere, the grandioso of it all. To come out, beat Cloud9, like completely fair play. The fact that
Yeah.
you make it close against the major winners,
Oh,
really
yeah.
well done.
Stage was cool. Despite the
yeah,
lack
it
of
was.
crowd, the stage, the circular stage, I thought
Yeah.
was really cool. Yeah,
It was great. And what it does is it puts belief in these academy projects. I think it was like 30% of all of the players in the playoffs were academy graduates, which is an insane stat to me. Like, that is great.
Yeah, MOUZ to me, they've got to be like the case study for how the academy system can work, right? And the fact we now have the dedicated academy league, we've got more and more tier 2 tournaments for academy teams to play in these days. Like for MOUZ, they definitely mastered the system early. Whether they can continue to master that system as time goes on is yet to be seen. But even right now, I wouldn't even see an opportunity for them to call up any of their academy players, because this lot just looks so damn good. Yeah, the numbers might not say that, but I think that the numbers are telling a lie at the moment, because they just look fantastic, right? Any team that makes it to the semi-finals of a major deserves, I think, at least some plaudits, at the absolute minimum, if not a lot of plaudits for them. And I think we've given them so many so far because of how great they have looked over the course of this one. You mentioned it, from the challenges into Legends, and then into the playoffs itself, right? Like they just looked amazing. So that's really all you can say about MOUZ in how well that they did there. I think that there's nothing you can take away to be negative from their run. And again, I had my doubts because of the experience of their own right, but for me, experience, it wasn't quite as much of a detriment as I ultimately thought it would be. I think we're probably all in agreement as that one. And as time goes on, the experience will mount, right? They'll get better and they'll do much better other tournaments in the near future. A team that said, actually, that I remember Mezzi actually going on an interview during HLTV Confirmed saying, I don't think we've even hit half of the potential that we've had.
Yeah.
That has to encourage me for how Fnatic's tournament went, because they also have to take a lot of plaudits in my eyes, guys.
I think, for me personally, they went 3-2 in the challenger stage. I was going to talk about it earlier, Jay, right? And you said, we'll wait until this moment here. So I'll let it bang just for a second here, right? Fnatic were a team that come into this challenger stage, right? And to be honest with you, they didn't look amazing, right? They beat Cloud9 in a best of one, amazing. They beat OG in a BO1, amazing. They lose to MOUZ and Outsiders in BO3s, and they beat 9Z 2-0. So by the skin of their teeth, despite going 2-0 up, they do qualify for the Legend stage. They go 3-1 in the Legend stage, right? They put on a fantastic display. The only team they lose to was Heroic, who looked, I mean, I would say at times unbelievable in this tournament, right? So understandable. A good form Heroic, I don't think Fnatic are ever going to be. And the fact that then you rock up into the champion stage, and sure, it was a bit disappointing to see that it was 0-2, didn't really get a good challenge in that quarterfinal game. Fnatic can only be proud of themselves because you look at this team and you look at the time that they've been together. Well, it's not been very long, and I will argue it's kind of the whole storyline of this major, right? These fresher teams, the newer looks, have been looking unbelievable. FaZe joined the team August 4th, right? Nikodos and Roy joined from Copenhagen Flames June 1st, right? So realistically, you got your full 5 on August 5th. And the fact that at this moment in time, you're able to make top 8 at a major, your first major as a team. And if I'm honest with you, Fasha, Nikodos, Roy, no tier 1 experience. Mezzy, very little before Fnatic. Crims is the only one really that has that knowledge and experience. And he's the one not really chirping up. It's Mezzy on the calling. It's Nikodos on an AWP. And you're playing tier 1 teams and you get top 8 at a major. Brilliant. One of the best storylines we have this event.
Yeah, 100%. I was going to say
agree.
the exact same thing. Trav?
Yeah, I was just going to say that, you know, I love Fnatic as much as the next guy, and I completely agree with you. You just have to temper expectations a little bit and say the teams they beat to get to the playoffs are very bad NIP, a very iffy ENTs that can either be decent or terrible, and Big playing with Sin, who got also a decent draw and never really, you know, probably should have been there either. So I agree with you. I'm a big fan of this team. Major playoffs that exceeded their own expectations. They said themselves, this was a great goal for us to reach. It sets them up nicely for the future, but they didn't necessarily beat any of the big boys apart from that OT against Cloud9 in the previous stage. So very good. I love everyone on the team. But yeah, you have to say that you can't necessarily expect the same sort of performance next major if big boys show up, if you get what I mean.
Yeah, I feel like as well. Well, I feel like Mezzy said as soon as they made Legend Stage, they were like, "That's what we wanted. That was our goal to make the Legend Stage." And then what then happens is they play without pressure, and you see Roy and Fasher in particular play incredibly well in that Legend Stage comparatively to how they performed in the challenges. And there you get to see a little glimpse into what Fnatic life will be like in the future if all these guys start clicking together. And I think that's really exciting and promising.
Yeah, again, if what Mezzy's saying is true, right, that they haven't even hit half their potential, then I'm excited to see what Fnatic will be like at their full potential, honestly. I can understand where he comes from in that sort of sense, and Fnatic have certainly proved quite a lot in this major. I don't think they've got anything else coming up as well for the rest of the year, so... Oh, no, hang on, they've got Espo, of course. Yeah, they're coming to Finland with me. We'll get to see how well they'll do there, and if they can hit those high notes. I mean, when you think about Fnatic and where they stand, right, and how they did, right, you saw that achieving the Legend Stage was their big goal. If they can do that and then go to the Champions playoffs, I see no reason why they wouldn't be a shoe-in to win that Espo event. And given what we've seen from Fnatic, if they can do that, it would be further proof to what they could do in 2023, right?
Yeah, I agree. I think they're a team that could certainly. I mean, what does Espu give? It gives a Katowice play-in spot, right?
Yeah.
So if they can have some success there and win that event and make it through, then that could, you know, propel them up even further. As you say, I think Retro made a good point as well that Mezzy is looking like one of the best fragging IGLs at the moment, so that's a really good sign too. Their Espu group has Complexity, BNE, Saw, and 500, which is Xscade, I believe. So yeah, that is probably three out of the 5. Sorry, they should probably be beating every day of the week. There, I would say.
I'm looking at the teams attending. I think they're the strongest team there.
I don't debate that.
I think the argument can be made 100%.
I mean, I don't debate it at all. Wait, hang on. You think Complexity are going to go far?
I think Complexity might even do well in this event. I genuinely think so. But that's a whole different
right.
That's a whole different conversation.
You're coming on the Elisa Post show, then, aren't you, mate? Right.
Thankfully, I'm not casting their group.
Well, I probably won't be casting them in the arena, so, you know, we'll let that one go. Right, a team that I certainly won't be casting, and a team that didn't do all that great during the playoffs as well, was Na'Vi, and probably that was the biggest disappointment of this major when it comes to individual performances, because this was theirs to lose, ultimately, boys, and they lost it, all right. Obviously, the team that lost to was Furia in that quarterfinal match, and we can, you know, I know we don't want to talk about the crowd too much, but obviously Furia would look like a far better unit than what Na'Vi were able to do in that particular game. So how do we assess Na'Vi off the back of their loss?
I'll tell you what, it was poor, but I think you look at how they did in the Legend stage as a whole. They beat Vitality in triple OT. They lose 16-14 to Cloud9. They lose 16-14 to Liquid, and then they demolish BNE and Big. Like, to get where they are, you got to have cool heads, and they had exactly that. But I did think they got absolutely rattled against Furia. I think as soon as Simple stood up and put his hand to his ear after the first map, I thought you
Yeah.
are going to get schooled by this crowd. And they did, right? They lost 16-10 on Ancient, 16-10 on Mirage. A brilliant game from Furia all in all. For Na'Vi, though, after how they did in the clinic they put up against BNE and Big in the Legend stage, I think you'd be a silly man to say with that momentum, they should have just gone on and won the whole thing. 100%, they should have gone on and won the whole thing. They got smacked.
Yeah, it's a shame, isn't it? Because I mean, even that Mirage game and even the Ancient map, I feel like even still could have gone either way. Nuke definitely could have gone either way. That famous pistol loss or victory for Na'Vi, where they had the 5-7s when Furia were on the path to victory. Furia could have won all 3 maps. But on Ancient, there were 2 rounds they could have won, which would have changed the perspective of the half if they had a defuse kit. On Mirage, there were 2 rounds, I think, on CT side where they could have won if they had a defuse kit, which could have changed the complexion. You never know how those sort of $400 purchases, if that they would, don't be a loser, buy a diffuser. It is the classic saying, but without those small little factors, if you just look at the teams the performances in general, Simple underperformed. People have been figuring out Bit. He stepped up a little bit, I've got to say. He had genuinely a decent performance against Furia, but previously Bit has been getting figured out more and more on this roster, and he hasn't been the headshot machine that we've seen from him in the past. And SDY, he's doing his best, bless him, and I think he's actually got to give plenty of props to how well he's done considering everything. But I think maybe Na'Vi need to move on and move away from what is technically, is it still classed as a stand-in, technically, SDY?
Yeah.
So I think they need to find a permanent fifth. And maybe, as I said earlier, eccentric players are on the market. Other players from the CR scene are getting more eyes looking at them thanks to all the academy leagues, etc., etc. Maybe it's time to move on from SDY.
I'm certainly in agreement on that front of things. I don't know how many options they'll have, though, because the situation between Ukraine and Russia is still very sort of awkward. And
Has to be
Na'Vi,
a Ukrainian player, right?
Yeah,
Pretty
Na'Vi
sure.
have taken a hard stance on not taking any of the Russians. So Entropic will be off the table. FaZe, I think, are mostly off the table. Spirits, yeah, off the table.
They're all Russian.
There's just not a lot of major options for them. And that's the key thing, right? Like Na'Vi, I'm not in disagreement with you at all for getting rid of SD or moving on from SDY, because that just seems to make the most amount of sense considering what we just saw from the stat sheet, and as well as that, the teams didn't look as cohesive as they used to be when they had Boomich in the roster. I'm not sure whether Boomich going back to him is really an option for them considering the circumstances around himself, but to me, I feel like that's the only really the most viable option right now for Na'Vi here, if you're talking about moving back towards other positions.
It would feel like going back in time, though, wouldn't it? And I feel like
It's a waste of time as well.
It's a waste of time for me. I mean, regressing doesn't usually work. It's worked with Cadian on FaZe for a certain period, but Carrigan on FaZe for a certain period. But yeah, I don't think you can go back to Boomich. But as you say, that's the problem for Na'Vi. They find themselves in a tough situation where they need a big bit performance. They need a big electronic performance. They need some Simple to be the Simple we know he can be, not a -9 0.87 rating Simple like we saw against Furia, for them to win these games. And yeah, I don't think necessarily if they don't have the option to pick up a Russian player, even if they are necessarily on the side of Na'Vi and on the side of Ukraine, I feel like maybe they just have to stick with it and what they have now.
Righto, so not very encouraging for where Na'Vi could be in a few months' time. I believe they are playing both the Blast events as well, so we get to see how that'll play out for their own right. I love how I say that, and both Trav and Retro just look over to their monitors just to double check, make sure I'm correct on my stance there. I'm sort of in a similar boat, right? I think in the long term we are looking at moves to move SDY on. That seems to be the most obvious thing to do to give Na'Vi their chance to resurge in that sense. I believe, Retro, you wanted to talk about Spirit, right?
A little bit. I had them 0-3 in my pick'ems, and if I'm honest with you, I don't regret it whatsoever. I personally, I'm not a massive fan of Spirit's work, but I will give them props in this event because they looked okay, right? They looked decent. You go through 3-2 with some very shaky results. You know, Furia beating you is a bit of a question mark. You beat BNE, you lose to outside of 16-14, could have been very serious. Liquid nearly beat you in a BO3 as well. I don't know. I think that when Spirit look good, they've looked really good, and I can't take that away from them. However, I will say one thing, and that is that in this event, you're playing Heroic, and you lose 16-8, 16-14 on Overpass. It was very close. Spirit's map pick. Obviously going wayward, then Heroic obviously blowing them out the park in terms of the BO3, got very close on Overpass. Acadian 1v3, that was probably the best clutch, the best moment of the major. Maybe James 1v3 is close to it as well. I've got to give it to them, man. They did all right in the major, but I think bang average. I would actually say they did bang average, and they didn't surprise me. They didn't disappoint me. I think it's very much the argument that we made with Liquid is that they did exactly what I thought they would heading into this event, and it was a bit of a weird one because they kind of took a lot of detours. It was a lot less cleaner than maybe some people at home would expect, but they did average. And that's, if I'm honest with you, that's been Spirit this entire year, man. They have been doing average. I don't think any performance this year has wowed me.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, fair enough. I can't really debate that, honestly. I was thinking a similar sort of thing, right? Because you mentioned the whole comparisons with Liquid and just them being bang average. And that really is what screams to be Spirit at its own, right? Like, their top 8 is fantastic, but they just don't really look like a special team. That could, and I reckon they could be a team that would easily lose out in a sort of capacity, right? I was also in a similar boat with you in my pick'ems. I was like, nah, I don't think they're going to make it out of Legend stage. But they did. I don't even think I had them down to do much in the RMR either. But the point is that like they are a team that just sort of exist, and they'll have some decent runs, but I don't know if you could really. I mean, top 8 is still top 8, but it just doesn't feel like it was a special. It doesn't feel like it was a truly special sort of run to me, honestly.
No.
I feel like you got to look at the players that played well, and you got to look at the players that stepped up for Spirit. Siren had an incredible major, wonderful, performed really well, answered a lot of questions that we've got around the Spirit roster. Very young, up and coming talent. He's legit, man. He's a very good player. Very impressed with how he performed, and Siren as well. He flies under the radar on this Spirit roster. When you talk about players that are looking to step up on Spirit, who do you normally look to? You look to Patsy. You look to Magix, who has been wildly inconsistent throughout 2022. Don't really talk about Siren. Siren had an incredible event, and I feel like his praises need to be sung because he was one of the key fundamental reasons why Spirit made it to top 8. It's him and the youngster Wonderful, and Chopper having some very good calls as well. They run it close against Heroic. They beat Liquid when we're sat here saying not even 20 minutes ago that Liquid should be that quarterfinal team. Hugely impressive for them.
I don't know. I think for me, maybe I've taken it down a notch from what I said. I'll take it down a little bit and say maybe fair that they actually have done all right in this event and maybe a little better than you'd expect. I will say one thing though, and I think Jay said it perfectly, is to me maybe Wonderful is that new pickup. I'm not convinced just yet because I want to see a few more results before I believe in that project a little bit more. But Old Spirit for me was never a side. Like I never saw an individual that could pop off. That was a Yakindar to Liquid. That was a Cadian to Heroic. A Keserato to Furia. And I could name so many. A James to Outsiders. All of these teams in this event have had players right at the top that you could consistently rely on to put in banger performances. For me, I didn't really see that in Spirit. And maybe now Wonderful is that, right? Maybe he is the real deal. And this event was good for them. But I think I need personally a little more time and a few more results from Spirit before I really, really believe in this project.
Well, gentlemen, we're pretty much out of time at this stage, so I want to start moving on to talk about the grand finalists. Obviously, Heroic and Outsiders were the squads that took each other on in that in that grand final match, and Outsiders were the team that ultimately took the major. So, where do we want to start here? Who do we want to talk about first?
I'll quickly take the floor on Heroic and say that I actually put them in the same sort of column as Furia now for me, because Furia we're in that situation where they're at the home major. you have to wonder now for both Furia and Heroic whether they think this was their best ever chance to win a major, and whether they're now thinking, oh no, are we ever going to get in this situation again? Are we ever going to perform as well as we did to get in this sort of environment to make it this far? Heroic got blown out of the water in the final by Outside. Outside did absolutely everything right. And while I think that the whole tournament even necessarily for Fury as well, actually, that's why I put them in the same column. I honestly think this tournament can be classed as a success for both Furia and Heroic. Furia made it to the semis, for goodness sake. Heroic made it to the grand bloody final.
Oh yeah.
But like, they're gonna be thinking to themselves now, have we just missed the opportunity of a lifetime? And Heroic will certainly be very disappointed with the showing they put on in the grand final as well. Considering they've had good games against outsiders in the past, they got completely schooled.
Especially in that overpass, right? Like the 16-5 was probably the one that really highlighted how boned they ended up becoming, right? And that wasn't the first time that they had problems like this over the course of the playoff stage. Like, it felt like the mental was a serious issue for me on Heroic over the course of this playoff run, especially. Like, you can understand why it would happen over against the Furia, because you had an entire arena packed up against you. And in that sense, you could see where the mistakes were coming through. But even in this particular map up, things just really shat the bed for the Heroic side. And when you take into account that assessment that you just made there, Trav, with the situation of will they ever make it to this position in the end, we'll never know. There's a good chance that they might not be able to pull it off again. Like that whole situation is probably going to impact them even worse. And when we're talking about mental game here for the Heroic side, like, I feel like that in the long term that could really impact their results.
I feel like what's crazy to me is the fact that they threw away that advantage they had on Ancient. They win it out in overtime. They then go and bang out Furia on that final map. And for me, that game, that Furia Heroic one, where you saw in my pick'ems, I was like, whoever wins that's going to win the major. And then the Heroic that we saw comparatively in the final was just night and day. It's what we saw against Furia. And you talk about Heroic don't normally perform well in front of these big crowds. The biggest test of their lives was in that semi-final against Furia, and they did stumble, but they came back. And I was like, shit, these guys look legit. At the RMR, they look legit. Cadian was calling some of the best Counter-Strike I've ever seen. The reads he had on that CT side in particular, like on maps like Inferno, in Mirage, he was living inside these guys' heads. But no, it was all Jame in this final. And what's cool as well, I thought the veto was all wrong for Heroic in the final as well. The fact that outsiders, they've come basically into 2022 not touched overpass and then brought it in for this major is so cool. And the fact that they were playing it before, like they had games with it, I think in the Stockholm major in 2021, and then they played it with Avangard all the way back in 2019. The fact that like James kind of used it as a little bit of a trump card because they come off the back of winning Rotterdam and they looked really good. And it was like, well, why aren't these guys? Why isn't anyone picking overpass against outsiders? Because they always float it. They always float it. And somehow it's just never come up. So it was always there. But now it's the ace in the hole type of thing. And they've got a really refined overpass. Overpass is a map that's going to suit outsiders tremendously. Sit back, quick rotations on CT side. Fuck yeah. That's an outsiders classic.
Yeah, I mean, for the outsiders, I look at their grand final overall, and just to switch off to their whole side of things, and I do feel like I'm getting Gambit vibes from this team and from this overall win, because it was a fantastic major run. But just a show of hands real quick, who actually had them down to win this major coming into it?
Nah, no way.
No one?
Top four.
Top four at best? Anyone?
Top 4. Yeah.
Top 4?
I wouldn't even go that far. I'd have had them top 8, I reckon.
I mean,
I feel like it's because of recency bias, because I saw them at Rotterdam and the way that they were playing, it wasn't like they're saving a lot less. Don't get me wrong, there's rounds that they will just go and save in Palace. There'll be like 5 of them running away. They save a lot less, and they have now the pieces such as your Fame and your Norbert where they can just go a bit aggressive at times, especially on T sides. And it's this dynamic approach of outsiders that's really enabled them. And I was very impressed with what I saw. So yeah, I thought top 4. I didn't think that they'd have the chops to make it all the way through. I thought that they'd fall to a Cloud9 or maybe even Mouse, just how good Mouse looked originally in that first semi-final. But fair play to them. All you got to do is just give them praise, really, because they performed exceptionally well and they played a brilliant brilliant style of Counter-Strike. It's not for everyone, but I tell you what.
Yeah. Yeah, honestly, I think you're spot on. I mean, they beat who was in front of them, and that's the most important thing for outsiders. Like, I mean, we can go into the debate about whether this is a win for outsiders or a win for VP or not. All that sort of politics and stuff like that. But realistically, the players, I'll be honest, as you say, they've never been my favorite. I've always not really enjoyed watching them play, but it's it's gone from going like going to okay, I respect you. Like looking at this, it's just absolutely brilliant to see. I mean, and who would have thought, Norbert and Fame, who we've casted so many times, playing
K23
K23, carrying the hell out of them, and they're now their major champions before the likes of Nico, Zyro, all these legendary players that are looking to one day win a major, and they got there first. And obviously, I think what I will end this off on, as of course we're pushed for time, is the fact that James, his English interviews, what he said, oh, my English is cringe, oh, why am I here? All that stuff, I've got to say, has endeared him to me out of anyone at the entire major. Like, huge respect.
I love him,
and I think it can only be deserved for him.
I can't wait to watch his stuff on his YouTube channel.
Good shit. Retro, thoughts on outsiders?
Really good team. I think this event, it's proved. I think James is up there. I'd say top 3 IGLs of the world right now. I will not hear it any other way. I think the way he plays Counter-Strike, do you know what? A lot of people shit on the idea of saving so much. I wish for someone that doesn't believe the James IGLing is the way to go back in that game and count the amount of times, had he have not saved, had he have not called a save call earlier on, that his team wouldn't be able to buy an AWP, that he wouldn't be able to get an AWP, that his team wouldn't be able to have a spare rifle, and the amount of loose change they have in their back pockets to bring out these surprise buys, and the amount of times James can just pluck out an AWP on an eco round and kill 2, kill 3. It's insane. James is one of the best in the world right now. I have no argument against it. I don't think anyone can argue against it. He's played some unbelievable Counter-Strike. I'm in awe of James CS. And sure, it may not be fun to watch, but at the end of the day, they don't give a shit if it's not fun to watch. They're here to win titles. They've just won the biggest one of the lot. And James is the most instrumental piece, in my opinion, to that roster. He played it to a T. He schooled Heroic, where Cadian was probably looking like one of the best callers in that event. I think Brandon said it perfectly. He had such deep reads. He had such a good mind heading into that event. And the fact that James able to make it look like boys against men on the server in that BO3 grand final, you can't argue. James deserved that MVP, not just because of his ability on the AWP, it's because he's a fucking good caller as well. He schooled everyone in that event. Schooled them.
And he lost Ikindar. Everyone thought, this Outsiders is done now. And guess what? He's plucked 2 legends from K23 and he's made them major champions. James, we bow down to the statue of the legend
so
of
funny,
this major.
by the way. That's so funny.
They'll make murals in his honor, I think, perhaps in Rio, maybe. I don't know. They would definitely do that if Fallen fucking won the major, but that's not going to happen anytime. Yeah. So. With that is the major wrapped up, gentlemen. We fucked predictions, but we've had a good old time in this one. And I thank you very much for joining me over the course of this podcast. We'll try to wrap this up real quick because BDog, you do have to actually leave. I know we pushed past your upper limit time.
You're good.
So am I good? Okay, well, fantastic. We'll keep fucking talking. I'm joking.
Ted's in chat right now. It's just whenever Ted needs me.
All right, I see. Cool. Then we'll wrap this up by just sort of plugging our shit and everything. First of all, there should be a post show for post Elisa Masters this coming weekend. So we will. I know that Retro and Trav, you guys are going to be casting the B streams and stuff, and obviously I'm going to be there at the arena itself. Is it A stream? Yeah. Oh, I saw you on Twitter saying it was the B stream. So
we thought it was as well, but we weren't. We weren't
on
the A stream.
Right.
So.
Okay. Cool. Well, then in that case, you guys can definitely enjoy some group stage action. I'll be there in the arena. I've just realised this will be the Elisa Masters crew plus BDog in today's stream. So I've just realised that. Sorry, mate.
That's all right.
But yeah, no, I mean, I'm sure to invite you guys back if you guys are going to watch it. I know that Retro and Trav certainly will. So hopefully we'll get a post show going. Of course, it is going to be a busy time, so no promises in that sort of front. But as for my panelists, of course, thank you, gentlemen, for joining me. We'll plug your shit going clockwise, Retro.
At @you_Retr on Twitter. I will say one thing. I want the pick'em system changed. I want it on a point
Yes.
system and percentages.
Yes.
That's what I want, and I'll leave it at that.
Of course you do. You suck. Right now.
Fuck off, Brandon.
Trav?
At TravCS on Twitter. Go look at 2.5 Talent, my podcast with Neo and Paladin. Yeah, I think that they should add a new pick'em system where if you predict the scores correct, you get an extra point and you stay in the running.
Yes.
BDog?
Wow. At BDog CSGO on Twitter.
And that's the show. Thanks everyone for coming back for the Rio Major Pick and Post show. We'll be back hopefully for the Elisa Masters when I do arrive back in the UK. But until that point, we bid you all adieu. The Rio Major has concluded. Congratulations to the outsiders. And we'll see you back here for even more stuff in the
Fuck
very
your diamond
future.
coin.
Fuck your diamond coin as well. We'll see you back here at some point soon.